Okay, announcements by the Mayor. I'm looking at you all down there. It looks like it's giving me the heebie-jeebies. It looks like being back at school for examinations. So I'm glad I'm up here and not down there. So I would just like to start off by thanking everyone for the civic dinner. We had a great time. Managed to raise a bit of money for the charity, so thank you for that. Item 12 is withdrawn. There will be a 10-minute break. We think it might be between items 9 and 10, but that depends on time. And just one final little bit of housekeeping. When you want to speak, raise your hands. Keep your hands raised until you get the nod that we've seen you. So don't put your hand up and then put it straight back down, because there's a good chance we won't have seen it. Okay? So thank you for that. The Chief Executive has some announcements.
Oh, I have to start again now. I didn't think that was low for me. Ooh, sorry. Okay, let me start again. So, good afternoon, members. I'm pleased to advise Council that the Kirklees procurement team has been successful in achieving the National Government Opportunities Excellence in Public Procurement Award for the Best Procurement Delivery in Public Sector. This was for the Kirklees Intervention and Support Service for housing-related support services. This is a social outcomes contract focusing on creating closer collaboration and partnership working to achieve better outcomes for clients. This is the third year that this team have received an award in different categories of achievement. I'd also like to inform Council of some other awards that officers and services have been shortlisted for. I thought I'd start Council on a high. So, the Kirklees Catering Service has been shortlisted for the Lead Association for Caterers in Education Catering Business of the Year Award. The European Diversity Awards have shortlisted both the Iroko Project for the Community Project of the Year Award, and our very own Siraj Mayat has been shortlisted for the HR Champion of the Year Award. Well done, and good luck to all of those who are still waiting the outcomes of the awards.
Item 2 then, apologies for absence. Are there any apologies for absence? Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We have apologies from Councillor Donald first and Councillor Kath Taylor. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Sokol.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Further to our two apologies you already got, Mr. Mayor, I think from Councillor Akhtar and Councillor Amanda Pinnick. I got another apology, Councillor Mumtaz Hussain, and Councillor Aaron Hill, and Councillor Nashin Dodd. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Sokol. Was there another hand went up? Oh, Charles, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Apologies from Councillor Terry Lyons.
Are there any other apologies? No. Item 3 then, minutes of the previous meeting. I move the minutes of the meeting of the Council held on the 8th of September 2021 be approved as a correct record. Is that seconded? Ah, Councillor Cooper.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak on the minutes of the last meeting. And as you'll remember, the A629 scheme, which is going to see over 100 trees removed in that scheme to widen that road, was a big issue at the last full council meeting. A number of things have actually happened since then, which are worthy of noting by the council. And that is that the Kirklees' own tree officer has said, in response to the council's report... Sorry?
Councillor Cooper.
Yes?
Minutes, are they accurate or not?
We're allowed to speak on any item of the agenda, and we can speak on any item of the agenda.
I'm being told not.
Which council procedure rule? I've got a copy here. Which one is it? Which council procedure rule is it I'm breaking?
Sorry?
I'll just tell me which one.
We will find it in a minute.
Okay. In the meantime, shall I carry on?
No.
Okay.
Councillor Cooper. Chief Legal Officer will comment.
Oh, okay, all right. Council Procedure Rule 7. No discussion shall take place on the minutes except on their accuracy, and any questions on their accuracy shall be raised by motion. After any questions...
Isn't there a contradictory rule?
Not in relation to the minutes. It says no discussion shall take place on those minutes except on their accuracy. I'm not sure that this is in relation to accuracy.
Okay. I've read a rule which says that we may speak on any item on the agenda.
This is a specific CPR in relation to the minutes, Councillor Cooper. It's very clear. It says no discussion shall take place on those minutes.
Okay.
And that's very specific about the minutes rather than other items on the agenda.
Okay, fine.
If the Mayor wants to use his discretion, he may do that, but that's an issue for him.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. You might get a chance later on. Right. Item 4, declarations of interests. Oh, no. All those in favour? That's carried. Yes, I'm grateful that we have Councillor Bolt here to correct me every time I make a mistake. 4 declarations of interest. Members who have any disclosable pecuniary interests which would prevent them from discussing or voting on any item should disclose their interests now. Are there any interests to declare? There doesn't appear to be any interests, but I will remind members who have declared or who have not declared but think they need to declare to complete the form and submit it to the clerk by the end of the meeting. Item 5, petitions from members of the council. Are there any petitions to be submitted? Councillor Burke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for giving me the opportunity to present this petition on behalf of residents in Linley and also business owners in Linley in relation to unused land just off Thorncliffe Street in Linley. The petition is signed from residents, businesses and supported by myself and Councillor Smith to support the proposal which sees and seeks to use this unused land as a car park in Linley. Linley over recent years has lacked any kind of strategic plan to deal with the new housing that's taken place. Hundreds of new houses have taken place. and not putting in place the infrastructure to deal with the new homes and the businesses as well. The businesses have supported the application due to the lack of parking in Lindley, especially on Lidgett Street, and also the existing car park that just has 20 car parking places. We have sought advice on this and spoke to the Cabinet member. Unfortunately, we've not had a response that we have thought that was adequate or indeed acknowledged the need and the responsibility that should be there in order to have a car park in Lindley to help those businesses, to help the local economy and encourage people to come into Lindley.
Thank you,
include all of the shoppers.
I admire your ability to talk at great length about just submitting something like a petition, but I think we've got the gist of it.
Oh, so I just wanted to make sure everybody was okay with them.
We know,
so,
we know. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is presented on behalf of myself and Councillor Smith, on behalf of the businesses and the residents of Lindley.
Thank you very much. All right, Councillor Sokol. Councillor Sokol.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I received two petitions, one from Kirklees Council Hackney Carriage Trade is in relation to the taxi rank on John William Street. Second one is small business who are based on same road again, John William Street and Town Centre. These are mainly affected by the recent changes at John William Street. So I got two petitions to hand in. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sokol. Are there any further petitions? In accordance with Council Procedure Rule 9, in brackets 3, I direct that the subject matter of the petitions be referred to the appropriate Service Director for investigation. Thank you. Item 6, deputations and petitions from members of the public. Item 6, first bit, deputations. Oh, I'm not, right. I'm not going to repeat myself. To receive deputations and petitions from members of the public. This evening we have one deputation. Can I invite Alison Gorn to please come forward and present her deputation?
Thank you.
Welcome, Alison. Welcome to the meeting. You have 5 minutes to present your deputation to Council, and we'll remind you when you've got 30 seconds to go.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. I'm sure you're aware that this week is Local Democracy Week, and that's the chance to help local people have a voice in the decisions that really matter for their everyday lives. I'm here because I don't feel like I have a voice in those decisions. In 2020, an independent review recommended that Kirklees Council needed to listen and engage with its residents. I hope you'll listen to me tonight. I've lived in Kirklees since 2019, but I've been part of the community for much longer than that through my work at Kirklees College. I live at the top of Blacker Road, less than 100 yards from the junction with the A629. A major part of the proposed road widening scheme on the A629 is proposed to happen right outside my front door. If the scheme goes ahead, the trees which form the view from my windows will be gone, and there will be 2 lanes of traffic queuing for the lights outside my house. I will no longer be able to park within sight of my home. When I first heard about the scheme, not from the council, but from local activists, I emailed my ward councillors, and I received a reply suggesting that the decision had been made and there was nothing I could do about it. I now know that this is not the case because I was able to raise an objection when the consultation was reopened in August. I hope that the appropriate people are going to read that objection. It seems to me that the scheme is to the benefit of motorists with no consideration for the local residents. Now, do we really want to prioritise car drivers within a climate emergency, when wider roads have been shown to encourage increased traffic. As someone who sees the traffic on the junction daily, I can't understand the need for road widening. There is not that much congestion. And I'm no expert, but I strongly suspect that the improved sight lines will only embolden drivers to take more risks and make the junction more dangerous. When I bought my house, I expected some noise and pollution from the road, but this is set to double, as there will be 2 lanes of traffic idling outside my house. Now, at the moment, half of those will be down by the cemetery wall, where nobody lives, but you want to put all of them outside our houses. And I chose to live in Edgerton because it's a beautiful area. The trees are wonderful, the historic buildings, and I stand to lose that right where I live. We've been promised parking in the cemetery, but I'm worried it won't be secure. And as a single woman, I'm worried about walking from my car to my home at night. Am I going to be clutching my phone and downloading that new 888 app? And what will be the effect of all this on the value of my property? I ask you to consider, if your home looked out on beautiful veteran trees that were full of wildlife and biodiversity, how would you feel if they're going to be cut down and replaced by an extra lane of traffic? Now, I understand that councillors can't answer questions on this matter, but I did have some questions, and I'd like to say what they are, so that I can give you a chance to consider what the answers might be. So my first question is, will the Planning Committee listen to Kirklees Climate Commission on this and on other road projects? They promised to do that in their own climate emergency motion. I've been told that this scheme will reduce pollution levels. Can you tell me what are the current levels of pollution at Blacker Road Junction and
30 seconds.
Thank you. And what they're projected to be when the scheme is completed? Does anybody know that? Also, why were we told that the scheme would provide a positive impact within 3 years when your own tree officers say it will take 50 years to replace the benefits of the trees that are going to be cut down? Thank you.
Councillor McBride to respond.
And thank you, Alison. I listened carefully to what you say, and you summarised 3 major questions when you said, will the Planning Committee listen to Kirklees Climate Commission on this and other and the answer undoubtedly is yes, of course it will. You say the scheme will reduce pollution levels. Can you tell me what they're projected to be after the scheme is completed? I am so assured there will be a massive improvement. You asked me further, can you clarify that the scheme will provide a positive impact in 3 years when your tree officers say it will take 50? It's within 3 years. I don't know where the figure of 50 came. I've never heard an officer say 50. So the impacts will be significant in a very short period of time. Can I reiterate the key point of this? Because the issue keeps coming up time and again before the council. So to put it into perspective, the A629 is Kirklees' busiest road. It's the main arterial road to Halifax and to the M62, both east and west, which causes congestion and slow-moving traffic over many hours of the day. The scheme will reduce congestion and will increase speeds, saving what seems a negligible amount of time, which it is for an individual vehicle. However, the cumulative impact over a 24-hour period, 365 days a year, times the volume of traffic, is enormous in terms of carbon saving and pollution elimination. Currently, this area is a traffic management area. one of 5 or so in Kirklees. This means the road is daily monitored for pollution to assess whether pollution is so great that the road must be closed. Can you imagine the impact of that, closing the A629? The scheme would remove this road from that category to the benefit of all users, not least the people who live in the area. And they're the most important people in many senses. They live in the area. I do recognise that point. I used to live in the area. I lived in the area for 10 years. I worked in the area for 30 years. So I'm acutely aware of what you're talking about. I am not indifferent to it. I'm sensitive to the impact. Yes, there will be a loss of 120 or so trees, some of which are mature, not all, and they're woodland trees. They'll be replaced by 89 almost mature trees. If you want an example of them, go into the station square and look at those trees. They were put there a couple of years ago. They're quite mature, and they're, you know, that's the kind of tree we are referring to. So, and additionally, as well as the 89 trees which will be, as it were, semi-mature, there'll be 750 saplings which will mature within 20 years. The net impact in carbon terms is a plus within 2.5 years, and cumulatively additional over the next 100 years. That is very, very significant if we really are concerned about climate change. Additionally, the 3 ward councillors and people living in the ward, on balance, very much approve of the scheme. I think that itself is significant, which I think, and I would contend, makes for an overwhelming argument in favour of the scheme. Alison, I'm meeting a delegation from the previous council meeting tomorrow, and happy to do so. If you were to join that, I think it's about 12 o'clock. If you'd like to join that, I'd be happy to talk to you further. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McBride. Are there any other petitions from members of the public? No. In that case, we'll move to item 7, which is public question time. Are there any questions by members of the public? Yeah. Yes, please. Please introduce yourself, advise us who your question is addressed to, and ask your question.
Okay. My name is Nikki Philakipru. I live in Holmfirth. And my question is about the Holmfirth Improvement Scheme. There's a couple of questions that I have to ask. The first one is, what are the criteria for moving the current parking arrangements from the south side, the loading arrangements from the south side? They're currently on the south side to the north side. At the moment, the way that it works in Holmfirth, and yes, there is traffic congestion. There is parking on the north side, but there is loading facilities on the south side. And my understanding, although I haven't actually seen the plan myself because I couldn't get access to it, is that the parking arrangements will change, and they will change so that there's no loading on the south side of that street where businesses need on-street loading because they've got, you know, various deliveries that need to be done. So what's the criteria for this? What studies have been done about this? And what impact studies have been done around, you know, how this is going to aid the businesses there? From talking to local businesses, they only seem to think it's going to be major disruption for a couple of years without any outside benefit, as well as the additional loss of actual free parking, which will probably decrease the footfall through the town. So that's my first question, is around the criteria for the parking and how it's been arranged. And then the second one is also around, well, has anybody done any environmental impact on the plans, given that you're going to be doing sort of major works? There's going to be, I understand that there's bats living underneath the river or around the riverside. There's criteria that I'd be very interested to understand what the environmental impact would be on that and whether a study's been done on it. As far as I can see as a resident, that £3.6 million would be far better spent in actually organising the traffic better, putting smart traffic lights in place, and thereafter keeping the market hall and actually improving it. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McBride.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is another scheme we've been into many, many times. The problem is that at the moment there's parking both sides of the road, and the net effect is the traffic can hardly get through. There is permanent, as it were, congestion during the normal trading hours. There's an attempt to open the road up, both for the benefit of people wanting to get from A to B, but also important for the people who want to use that area. So this is an unbalanced scheme, and there is no doubt, and one accepts, that there will be some disadvantage for people one side of the road or the other in order to resolve the problem. And it's been a hard decision to say exactly which side it should be, but obviously there had to be a movement which would allow the traffic to move through the area. And believe me, we've looked at this issue many, many times. It's been discussed with the public at least 3 times. I don't know whether you're aware of that. And all of those conclusions have been drawn to my attention and other members of the council, and we've concluded on balance this is the best we can do to resolve what is and has been over many years a problem, and it's a traffic problem in that area and critical to the development of Home Firth.
Thank you, Councillor McBride. Thank you to the Speaker. Are there any more questions? Are there any other people wanting to ask questions? No. In that case, we'll go to item 8, West Yorkshire Combined Authority minutes. To receive for information the minutes of West Yorkshire Combined Authority. The minutes are here for noting. Are there any comments or questions regarding the minutes? Councillor Bolt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I refer to page 30 in our pack, the issue about active travel and City Connect. I note from the minutes that Councillor Pandor was representing Kirklees at this meeting, and so I hope, and he will guarantee, that he ensured that the projects were giving good value for money. In terms of the City Connect Phase 3, Huddersfield Narrow Canal, as an active travel scheme, Councillor Pandor, I'm sure you're aware of the design criteria required for such schemes. And I refer and give you some examples from the government DFT gear change, a bold vision for cycling and walking. I'm sure as a council striving to encourage active travel and reduce car journeys, improve the environment, you're fully aware of this. This says that the key design principles for a route such as this says that the cyclists must be treated as vehicles, not pedestrians. Therefore, proper consideration given to the scheme design, surfacing and alignment. The routes of schemes must take account of how users actually behave. So I think from my time when I was a cabinet member, and I had some very good lead officers who used to tell me about desire lines. Are the desire lines of the users being taken into account for this? Crucially, on schemes that we've seen on canals, where we usually delegate responsibility to the Canal and Rivers Trust, who then put barriers, A-frame barriers, which cause users to have to dismount and people with mobility problems cannot access them. Barriers such as chicane barriers and dismount signs should be avoided. Can you guarantee that no such barrier will be in place on any active travel route in Kirklees? And crucially, the route should be designed only by those who have experienced it on a cycle. Have you cycled these routes, Councillor Pandor, before approving them? The situation as well that we see on many active travel routes, with the notable exception of the Spen Valley Greenway and the Birkby-Bradley Greenway, the latter of which is an adopted highway, is there's no maintenance improved. As I've highlighted on several occasions to Councillor McBride and colleagues, the Calder Valley Greenway, which is on land owned by Kirklees, has not been delivered in accordance with the planning permissions, a condition of which said each year there should be an annual user survey and consideration given for the road safety at every road crossing. Kirklees is failing its own planning conditions on that. So on this scheme which you're approving, is Kirklees Council providing route maintenance on it? And crucially, can you explain how you'll manage winter maintenance on this scheme? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ball.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Bott, who disappeared, for the very detailed questions. Firstly, I think it's really, really good news that we are being featured in the Combined Authority papers for the much needed investment that's coming in, because I remember a few years ago you were saying, well, we're not even mentioned. So it's really, really good that we are actually now getting the investment that's needed. In terms of the detailed questions you've asked for, the report actually is about the approval process within the Combined Authority, and there is a very detailed approval process which I will make sure that you get a copy forwarded onto, because I'm not a technical expert and I'm not going to pretend to be a technical expert, and I'm sure you also will agree that you're not a technical expert, but I'll make sure that the details are sent on to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pandor. Councillor Cooper.
On the 24th of September, with a degree of excitement, I went to my first ever West Yorkshire Combined Authority Scrutiny Panel meeting. And I was quite interested in it because I was the only Green member on any of the scrutiny panels, despite our party getting 10% of the vote in the local elections. Liberal Democrats, who do not begrudge their seats, got 9%, and they've got 6 members. So, you know, I thought it was pretty important that I turn up and represent the 66,000 people who voted Green across West Yorkshire. So I went to the meeting, and one of the disappointing things about this very first corporate scrutiny panel of the West Yorkshire Mayoral Combined Authority was that it was in quorum. Not enough members had turned out to actually make it a valid meeting. Not enough people cared enough about scrutinising the actions of the Mayor of West Yorkshire to be able to be bothered to turn up to ask questions. Not enough. Now, one of the interesting things about it is some rules had been applied, which meant that substitutes could come from other committees. So if somebody from your party wasn't able to attend, that you could ask somebody from, say, the Transport Committee or the Economy Committee to turn up in your stead. So it was possible. You got that flexibility to be able to get somebody to come out and attend. Except I had to turn up, because if nobody else did, then there you go. I note the or comment from Councillor Pandor. And so, you know, you look at this and think, are we taking this seriously? Are people taking their roles seriously on the Combined Authority? And so I think more needs to be done by other larger parties to actually turn up and take on their roles properly. Now, it wasn't just the corporate scrutiny panel, there were 3 scrutiny panels. It was also the transport scrutiny panel, no, the economy scrutiny panel as well, that was on the Monday. Nobody turned up, well, it was in quorum as well. I don't know about the transport scrutiny panel. Maybe that was as well. Maybe the first 3 meetings of the West Yorkshire Combined Authority, Mayoral Authority, weren't legally allowed to take place. So that is a real concern that I've got, and I wanted to state it here. I mean, look, that's another concern, is that we got 10% of the vote. Lib Dems, who again I don't begrudge their seat on the West Yorkshire Combined Authority, have a seat on the Combined Authority. We don't. We had more votes across West Yorkshire, and we don't have a seat. No, we've nobody representing us on the combined authority. And I do note that the Labour Party members, obviously not their union, the union bosses, but the members voted in favour of proportional representation at their conference before the motion was defeated. Strange democracy. So, you know, I would have thought that Labour Party people would be extremely keen on ensuring that voters are represented properly. And so I would suggest that we actually seek to change the rules that we've got with government to ensure that the voters of West Yorkshire are properly represented on the bodies that we serve on. Thank you.
Councillor Pandor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Cooper, for the comments and the feedback regarding the scrutiny panels. And I assure you I will look into that, because obviously, clearly there's something gone wrong. But just a bit of reflection. The Mayoral Combined Authority was formally elected in May, and there was a lot of debate that was going back and forth regarding should there be an election and how will the elections be carried out, and how will we make sure that people are safeguarded. But that decision was made, and we respected that decision, and the election did take place. And we were still in the middle of the pandemic. There were still restrictions in place, and it was only later on that the government quite rightly started to ease restrictions. And at the same time, we were going through a big debate about should meetings like this take place in the council chamber, and there are still debates taking place. Should we go back into the main council chamber? Because, to be honest with you, to me, and I'm sure many people will share the same concerns, that safety of members, to make sure that if they feel vulnerable, is paramount. Having said that, we have got legislation that has allowed us to go back into the council chamber and have meetings like this. And the key thing is, if it's a decision-making body, it has to be a meeting in person. And then again, I will check that out in terms of what the business on the agenda was. And I do know that officers have been working extremely hard to get up to speed from the old regime of the Combined Authority to the new Mayoral Combined Authority. In terms of the first issue you raised, Councillor Cooper, regarding proportionality and you having secured X votes against Y votes with other parties, actually, I'm really pleased that you are actually as committed as you are, because what we don't want to see is a situation going forward where your commitment is actually diminished even further, right? Because you know, politics plays out, and I don't want to see that commitment and that representation you have, because I do know that you take a really good interest, and you do actually represent, and you do add value to the Combined Authority. So I don't want to erode that representation. But on a note of moving forward, I will definitely look at this, because I don't know the facts, I don't know the details, but I do know that not just in Kirklees but across the country, there are still councillors, members who don't feel 100% comfortable in getting back to business as normal, because we're still in the middle of a pandemic. You've probably seen the figures regarding infection rates. They are going high as we speak. One thing that's quite comforting is the hospitalisation isn't going in the direction that we would not want it to see. But again, there is still a big risk out there. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Pandor. Councillor Richard Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wasn't intending to speak about this, but I've just listened to Councillor Cooper's remarks, and I'd like to say I support them in the main. I am actually the chair of the West Yorkshire Combined Authority Economy Scrutiny Committee, and we were also in court at our first meeting. And I think there is a greater issue regarding combined authorities nationally. There was a recent Manchester Evening News article which was describing similar issues in the Greater Manchester area. So what I think I'd like to say is I appreciate your support in this, Councillor Pandor, and I think it's absolutely vital that all of us treat the West Yorkshire Authority with the seriousness it deserves. There's a vast amount of money being spent by the authority. The Mayor has a large budget to spend, and she has given pledges when she was elected, and it's absolutely essential that all of us, irrespective of our political parties, do our diligent best in regards of scrutiny. And for my individual panel that I chair, I've made it very clear that this is a non-partisan, totally politically neutral panel as far as we can make it. Obviously, people have their own views. But what we're trying to do is to ensure that wherever possible, the money that's been pledged and spent is done in an effective manner. And so really, I'd just like to support everything that's been said already. And from my point of view, there is an action plan. Actually, I've asked officers today to work on with the other chairs to ensure that all members who've signed up to the scrutiny panels, all three of them, understand how important it is. There are actually rules regarding quoracy on the combined authorities, which are stricter than the individual respective councils, actually. I'm not sure exactly why that is, but I'm pretty sure there's a good reason for it. So we all need to make sure that any of our members, and I'm not actually suggesting any members in this chamber itself have been guilty of this, because I think certainly from my committee, there was no absent members from Kirklees, but other areas within the West Yorkshire area need to also step up. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Councillor Pandor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Richard Smith. Completely agree with what you're saying. I will look into this because there seems to be something that's gone wrong. I need to find out what it is and address the issue ASAP, because Councillor Smith is absolutely right. There is loads and loads of money that are going through the combined authority, and it's only right and proper that it gets the scrutiny and overview that it requires. Because my view was very, very clear before the combined authority was set up that the accountability arrangements could have been more on a par with the London Assembly, where you have more input into what the decision-making processes are with the combined authority. But that is something that we lost a debate on. We need to move on now. But what we did manage to do is secure extra scrutiny committees and places, and I will make sure that I feed that back into the combined authority, as will other members who share the same platform with me on the combined authority, because I think it's an important issue that we need to resolve as soon as possible. Thank you very much, Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Councillor Pandor. Councillor Bolt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a brief point of personal explanation as much as anything else. Councillor Pandor questioned my qualifications when I'm speaking about active travel. So just to put it on the record and clarify, it's not just as an interested person in helping the environment, Councillor Pandor. When I'm looking at the way that projects are being delivered, I have a qualification as a Prince 2 project management engineer. When I'm looking at travel issues, I worked for several years for City of York Council as a workplace travel coordinator. When I'm looking at how people cycle safely, it's because I'm qualified at National Standard Cycling Instruction, which is now called Bikeability. When I'm looking at how schemes are designed, it's because I was on the design team of the highly successful Way of the Roses coast-to-coast cycle route, which is one of the most popular tourist routes in the country. I had 7 years' experience as a community cycling development officer, covering the whole of North Yorkshire. So, Councillor Pandor, yeah, expert is a curious term, and it's once been defined as X is something that was, and a spurt is under a drip under pressure. So I will leave that to you to be an expert. I shall be a relatively interested and experienced partner. I hope this gives you the surety that when I'm talking about these things, it's not just from the point of view of representing the community. I have experience in what I'm talking about, Councillor Pandor.
Do you want to respond to that, Councillor Pandor?
I too am a Prince 2 practitioner, but my role here isn't to project manage and micromanage. I think we've got officers that are more than capable to do that, and I think it's clarity of roles. But I'm really pleased that we've got such expertise in Councillor Martin Bolt, because I didn't realise that you had a string of qualifications regarding the stuff that you just went through. I've even forgotten half the stuff that you went through. But in future, what I will do, I will seek your professional views, not your political views, your professional views, because anything that adds value to what I'm doing to represent Kirklees, not just in Kirklees, but also in the Combined Authority, I value that, Martin, and you know that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Pandor. We will go to item 9, page 37, Council Budget Strategy Update 2022-2023 and future years, reference from Cabinet. Councillor Paul Davis will move.
Give an overview of the actual paper. I'd like to give a little bit of context of the financial backdrop that we're facing currently and in the next few years. I think most of you will be aware the Chancellor will, in the next few weeks, deliver his spending review and autumn statement. And the LGA, that's the Local Government Association, have sent their detailed submission to the Treasury on behalf of local government. It sets out the urgent need for public spending to be reset in a way that is fit for the future, flexible to allow delivery of local priorities, and empowers councils to deliver on the ambition to level up in our communities. The LGA's analysis shows that councils in England faced extra cost pressures of almost £8 billion by 2024-25. And that's just to keep vital services running at today's levels. This total is not about addressing new pressures that will face councils in the next 3 years. It does not include the very real pressures that councils are facing here and now, such as paying care workers a fair wage or investing in the early intervention services which help families and young people falling into crisis. And to illustrate the scale of these extra demand and cost pressures facing councils, the LGA actually project that council tax income would need to rise by a quarter over the next few years to pay for this. Clearly, that's not something that we can envisage and would want to see that burden placed on our residents. So the significant financial pressures facing local services cannot be met by council tax income alone. Instead, the LGA's detailed submission is calling for the spending review to provide councils with a multi-year settlement which provides sufficient additional government funding and certainty to meet growing cost pressures and pre-existing challenges. The LGA's view is that if we are to come out of the pandemic with a society that is truly levelled up, the vital services that councils provide must be at the heart of it. So in the coming weeks, the LGA will continue to make this strong case to government. They're also concerned, in fact, what they say is alarmed, that there is no additional funding for frontline social care from the estimated £36 billion to be raised by the new UK-wide health and social care levy over the next 3 years. The issue of addressing NHS backlog and freeing up hospital beds cannot be done without fixing social care. And again, the LGA will continue to make strong representation on this. think this gives us a sense of where we are in terms of the medium-term forecast in England in particular. And it clearly demonstrates the challenges we face as a local authority. Now, please note that this isn't a political position. The LGA represents all parties in local authority. In fact, the leader is a Conservative, so this is absolutely not a political statement. This is a rational analysis being put forward by a well-recognised and well-respected organisation. So in terms of the report itself, the Cabinet is required under financial procedure rules to submit to Council a provisional budget strategy update no later than October each year for endorsement. This report rolls forward existing multi-year plans as a starting point for 2022 and 23. It also sets out a range of current baseline assumptions on net revenue spending plans, local tax and other funding, and current approved capital plans together with reserve strategies, and of course the HRA, which is a housing revenue activity. This then provides a baseline of financial planning framework for the subsequent development of budget proposals. Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, I will have to just have a drink of water, if you excuse me. If that's okay? I think we'll need a table with just a little bit of glass. My apologies. I'm hoping I haven't just caught my youngest daughter's cold, but I'm starting to feel that way with my throat at the moment. Thanks a lot. This then provides a baseline of financial planning framework for subsequent development of budget proposals for consideration at Budget Council next February to deliver a balanced budget for the forthcoming financial year, which we are obliged to do by statute, both for the Council's General Fund and the HRA. The report also makes reference to the baseline gap between net revenue spending plans and funding assumptions for 22-23 at 14.6 million on General Fund. The current pressures on high needs funding and the resultant accumulated forecast dedicated schools grant funding gap at 33 million by year end, and the relative financial health of the most recently updated HRA business plan. The MTFS update report also cross-references to the Council Plan update report, also on the same agenda in terms of the administration's ambitions, priorities and outcomes for the borough's residents, which helps shape the budget. And I think that's a crucial point, just to emphasise that there is that linkage, that both the Council Plan, Cabinet members' priorities and the budget are interlinked very closely. The report includes a number of significant markers that aim to further our ambition for the borough's residents, which will also inform subsequent budget development, including the Huddersfield Blueprint, or Cultural Heart in particular, waste strategy development, and SEND transformation. It also includes reference to the current economic outlook, the forthcoming autumn budget, 3-year spending review, which I've already referred to, where there will be an announcement by government, by the Chancellor on the 27th of October. This will be hugely significant for the medium-term financial stability, sustainability of local government sector. Not just in terms of the COVID recovery and supporting our local ambition for our own residents, but also regionally in terms of future transport infrastructure upgrading, inclusive economic investment, prosperity sharing, and levelling up agendas. It is, of course, also hugely significant in terms of proposals for future social care NHS funding. Alongside this, our existing financial plans means we'll be able to respond effectively to residents' priorities, despite an uncertain environment. In fact, a very uncertain environment. The COVID-19 pandemic continues to produce additional service demands and pressures on council finances. I think it's very clear for all of us to see the pandemic continues to have that impact and hugely concerns not just public health experts, but clearly those of us who have to provide services in the local
30 seconds
environment.
left.
So, in light of this, the headline-based assumptions for 2023 and future years at this stage pretty much reflect those set out in the annual budget report approved at Budget Council in February 2020. But clearly there's going to be a huge impact on the 27th of October, which we are waiting to hear, and will accordingly incorporate that in future reviews. So with that in mind, I move that the resolution of Cabinet held on the 12th of October 2021, as set out in page 38, be endorsed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Is that seconded? Councillor Pandor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to second that and reserve the right to respond.
Thank you, Councillor Pandor. Are there any comments on this matter? Councillor John Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you to Paul for his introduction, and particularly to the officers that pulled together this detailed report. It is more difficult this year than it is in most years to try and get to a position, and certainly in advance of the Chancellor's statement, I think what we have here is dare I call it, the best guess that we think the position will be, but there are so many known unknowns at the moment. It's difficult to really understand where we will perhaps be in maybe 2 months' time when we have a little more clarity around what decisions are being taken through the spending review. I still, as I've mentioned at previous meetings and through various other committee meetings, am unclear about the nature of the reserves position. And every time I read one of these financial documents, I can never quite add things up. And I'm a numbers person, always have been, and always feel uncomfortable when the numbers don't seem to add up for me. We talk in this report, which wasn't in the last financial report, we looked at specifically about £49 million worth of COVID-related funding that was rolled into reserves. But then later on we talk that we're only going to draw down, or we're anticipating drawing down 6.1 million of that in the current year. But in the previous statement it says it's anticipated to be largely applied in 2020, 2022. So those two statements, 1.5.6 and 1.5.7, don't seem to add up. They seem to contradict themselves. I'm sure that's not a debate we need to have in this hall tonight, but I do think there is still work to do to convince us that we understand where the money was or wasn't spent during the pandemic, how much of that came from the government as, you know, the agreed they would reimburse councils for the additional costs as a result of COVID, but also what happened to the money that we had that we didn't spend because we weren't able to do things, because things were necessarily closed or restricted as a result of the various restrictions we were under. And then just one final point. We do mention in 1.5.13 about the Levelling Up Fund bid for the Penistone upgrade of 48 million, which seems to be down as a council plan ambition, but I seem to recall that that was actually my local MP, Mark Eastwood, and Miriam Cates from Penistone Stocksbridge that brought that proposal forward. It wasn't something this council was doing. And members will recall that I have spoken on many occasions previously about the fact that whenever we've talked about transport in West Yorkshire, the Penistone line was not included in reports that were produced by this council. So I'm pleased to see it in here, but it would be nice to see a little bit of acknowledgement that that levelling up bid is coming from the M.
is some context to the numbers that will be presented to us, particularly when we start looking at budgets towards approving a budget in February. What I would like us to see is last year's budget against all the budget lines and what the forecasted position is for the end of the year. I think we need to put some context into what we're looking at the moment. We're just looking at the forecast, the plan, but I think we need to see what's happened in the past, because no doubt we'll be told again that we're going to overspend, and every year I've been here, it's not really happened in the way that we've been told it would. So I think we should all be pushing to see on the budget reports that we receive in the future that they also have last year's budget for at least the up and coming year, and also either the actual year to date and which period it's for, and the forecast for the year end. And then we'll really see which lines are new ones, which ones have been dropped, and I think we'll all understand what's before us a lot better. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Holmes. Councillor Marchington.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Paul, for your presentation. Thank you to the officers who have helped to prepare the report. It's interesting that we're sort of complaining, or some of us are complaining about the estimates that are in here. They're always estimates, they're always best guesses. That's the nature of the game. And best estimate is what we've got. I think what was interesting about last year's budget is, my perception, we had that in the rollover report, I think the last council meeting actually. It's the first time I've ever seen a budget come in online in 17 years, neither above or below. We've had both of those over the years, and that's because it seems that the government did fill most of the holes in spending. It would be quite interesting to see what the actual position is. What worries me about this, I'm fully supportive of what Paul Davis has said about the action through the Local Government Association, Conservative-led. I hope Conservative colleagues here will do that. There needs to be a fundamental review of how we finance the things we want to do in the country, and I do not think we're in a good place at the moment. We've seen a central government, Conservative-led, who has chosen to break its promise on raising taxes. We've got the highest levels of taxation, direct taxation in this country for probably 60 years. And there's no confidence that we're going to get any better in the foreseeable future, and the pressure is going to fall again on local government. Because that's, you know, the central government can do that with impunity, and it's us that get the flack for putting council tax up if we choose to do that, and it's very, very, very frustrating. I think what I want to see out of the budget strategy, and that perhaps from all of this, is some blue sky, you know, some really strategic, what do we need to be doing for the benefit of the people of Kirklees over the next 5 years as a short term, but actually the longer term, and how much money do we need to do it? And not, you know, we have to present a balanced budget that was in the limits, but social care, we've messed around with it. We've been putting up these little 3% over the last few years. We know it's not enough money. Very interesting what Paul said about what's going to happen to that 36 billion pounds. You know, what of that is going to come to Kirklees, and is it going to do the job that they claim to do? And if we, you know, let's work out what do we need to do just in social care to meet the needs of those people in Kirklees, and how much money do we need to do it? And not go cap in hand to central government, but to say if you're going to actually see the benefit of breaking your election promise to the British people and deliver what you say you're going to do, let's make sure that the...
Thank you, Councillor Marchington. Councillor Lawson.
Thank you, Mayor. And congratulations on the amount of money raised at your dinner. Well done. So thanks again. I also wish to thank officers for producing the budget strategy update. It can't have been an easy task in the current economic climate. We seem to have equal measures of flux and stasis in demand on funding at the moment. Unfortunately, most of the change that we see is in demand on services, and the standstill is in government funding. I'd just like to pick out some of the detail around the council tax expectations over the next couple of years and the adult social care funding in a very similar way to Councillor Davis, but I did choose a slightly different source. Last week, the Institute of Fiscal Studies gave a preview of the 2021 IFS Green Budget, there are some really interesting points in there about these issues. Under current government plans, a rise of 3.6% for the next 3 years would be needed to provide services at pre-pandemic levels. Further pressures could easily push that to 5% a year over or by over £220 by the year 24-25. Goes on to say that the government's social care funding is inadequate, stating that £5 billion a year over the longer term is a more likely sum than £5.4 billion shared over the next 3 years and shared with the NHS. The government's plans to relax means testing and increase carers payment, investing housing adaptations and supporting households, while worthy, could require billions more in the longer term. Council funding pressures are unlikely to be met through council tax rises, with even a 4% rise leaving a £2.7 billion national hole in 22-23. That's without this winter's anticipated pressures. The report points out the trap of council tax revenue, that the poorest areas raise less per person than the wealthier ones, causing a locked-in imbalance in revenue. For example, a 4% rise would raise £89 per person in a wealthier area, as opposed to 61 in the poorer areas. We are not a wealthier area. It's essential that the government funding is redistributed in a fairer way than it is right now. The existing funding formula is massively out of date, last reviewed in 2013. Population sizes and characteristics haven't been looked at since. The example the IFS go on to give is that since then the population of, for example, Blackpool has fallen by 2% but risen by 20% in Tower Hamlets. And now it'd be interesting to have that kind of information about where we are in Kirklees. The preview ends with failure to update the funding formula to account for changes in population and other factors driving needs mean the government is less able to target funding where it is needed most, potentially pushing up how much funding it has to provide overall. Now, that was all from the IFS report. The IFS is a respected institute, and the report is funded by the Nuffield Foundation. These are stark warnings about the future of our council and its funding. The Liberal Democrat group are deeply concerned that the inability to target adequate funding to those who need it most will put those people on life trajectories that are increasingly divergent from those in wealthier areas through no fault of their own. That's already begun, and it will get worse, not better this winter. Without clear and swift action from government, the services we provide will become nigh impossible to maintain. I hope the government is listening to these kinds of conversations around the country. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Lawson. Are there any more speakers on this item? Right of reply, Councillor Davis.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Some very interesting comments. I will try my best, John, to once and for all answer the issue about reserves. It is an interesting debate, and I know we've debated it many times. But just to be clear, and these are numbers that are in the report, we currently have usable reserves, excluding schools and public health, at 182.3 million. Well, these were April 2021 figures. And that equates to just over 57% of the 21-22 net annual review budget, which was 317.9 million. The balance includes 62.5 million of COVID-related reserves. And these largely are created from the roll forward of unspent COVID grants, which we received 2020-21. This expenditure is largely anticipated to be incurred now by March 2023. So those reserves, the COVID-related reserves, should be used. If we exclude those reserves, the adjusted usable reserves balance as of April 2021 is 119.8 million, which equates to just over 37%. Actually, it's 37.7% of the 2021-22 net revenue budget. And that's roughly equivalent to approximately 19 and a half weeks in-year net spend. And it should be noted that the equivalent usable reserves balance at April 2020, before the impact of COVID, was 107.9 million. When you compare us to the median percentage across 36 metropolitan councils, that was at 37%. So we pretty much smack there in the middle. I know nobody likes to be thought of as average, but we're average. We're right there, right in the middle. We're not an outlier, we're not at the top, we're not at the bottom. The target is, in terms of usable reserves, we're forecasting to reduce those to 78.5 million by year-end 2025-26, which equates to just around 25% of usable reserves. I hope that helps, and I hope that clarifies the situation in terms of numbers. And I don't like going through numbers, but I thought it was appropriate to do that so that the full council were aware of that situation. I'd like to thank both Councillor Marshington and Councillor Lawson for their comments. And it clearly, I think that debate is one that we need to continue having on the council. I think the idea that we live in a vacuum that are not impacted by that context of the financial backdrop, whether it's created by government, internationally, or by other factors, clearly is not one sustainable. We have to take that on board. We have to incorporate that in our forecast going forward. In terms of future presentations of budgets, I think that's a point that we've said before, and we've said to Councillor Taylor. We're happy to talk about how we present budgets. Certainly I'm not aware of any fundamental problems, but always open to ideas and views coming from any members on that. So, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. We will now go to the vote. I think we'll try it by show of hands first. If that doesn't work, we'll do a roll call. So, all those in favour? All those against? Abstentions? I think that's carried. Thank you. We will go to item 10 because we're getting through this agenda fairly quickly. So, item 10, page 109, our council plan, reference from Cabinet. Councillor Pandor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for that introduction to the council plan. I'm really pleased to actually be introducing this item because for the last few months we've been talking about recovery, and it's easy to talk about recovery, use slogans, you know, better days ahead and all the rest of it. But it's hard to deliver slogans, and it's also hard to deliver a vision that really means something to our residents, to our communities. And that's why having a plan to make sure that we communicate what we are doing, we communicate the detail, we make sure that our partners that help us in a partnership environment deliver what our communities need is very, very clear. It also needs dedication, and I know we are all dedicated because that's why we got elected as local councillors. And it needs commitment, a lot of motivation, because what we see out there, no matter what party you are from or who you are, that motivation is so important, especially when we see situations that unfold in front of our eyes. And that motivation needs to be fueled by energy and passion and belief in what we are doing. And that's what this is about. And even in tough times, it takes a lot of courage to actually stand up and fight for your residents and more communities. And again, I've seen that at its best in this council. And that's what this plan is offering. A plan for recovery that leaves nobody behind. The heart of the plan is the value base it has. And in Kirklees, it doesn't matter where you live, who you are, what race, what religion, and what sexuality or how you identify yourself. We need to make sure we carry everybody with us and everybody believes in what we are doing. And circumstances should not hold anybody back. And that's important to me. I'm proud to be part of the place, born and bred in Batley, but Kirklees is my place and it's my community. Proud of the achievements that we've achieved together, but we can do better, and that's what this plan is about. In recent years, we've seen a lot of divisions, and that's why the key message isn't just about inclusivity, which I've been talking about. It's also about unity and respect. Because we might have our different views, but unless we respect each other, we're a poorer place. And I hope that this debate is actually respectful. I'm all for having different views, but we need to make sure respect is critical, because that's what our communities deserve of us. We need to break down the cycle of marginalising people and creating divisions, because values are meaningless unless you've got action. And once again, action is what this is about. It's not just about a statement, it's about urgency and prioritising what matters. And the investment that we are putting in to accelerate the transformation of Huddersfield Town Centre, millions going into that to make sure that we actually are ahead of the game, millions going into the regeneration of Dewsbury. And again, you know, I'm really pleased that we worked in partnership with the local MP to make that happen, and we are doing our bit in terms of injecting £50 million into Dewsbury regeneration. And at the same time, we have not forgotten our smaller towns and villages. For example, Batley, Holmfirth, Cleckheaton, Hickwinwyke, because these communities also matter, and we have to make sure we carry these communities with us. We also need to deliver a transport infrastructure that is fit for a modern future, fit for a greener future, which includes both rail and road, and we are on with that through the recent devolution deals that have taken place, and I'm really pleased that we are now beginning to put some detail behind our plans, and that will be then matched with action. The climate crisis is very, very important. You know, we all agree on that, and I'm sure we all agree that, you know, we need to do a lot more. Words in themselves aren't enough. You know, build back better, you know, that's not enough. We need to make sure that we have actions at a local level at least. That's why we're committed to plant thousands of trees all across Kirklees. Electric charging points are going to be introduced everywhere. And our own fleet will make better use of modern technology to make sure that we also are able to recycle better, easier and faster for our residents. And supporting the Climate Commission is a priority for this council. It's a priority for me to make sure that we do achieve our net zero ambition by 2038. Children have always been a key part of what we do and what we believe in. You know, they are our future. And we need to make sure that children with special educational needs are also prioritised, and the learning and skills strategy that we have developed is also a critical and integral part of what we do, because we want to make sure that we deliver with our partners in a way that we've never done before, and it means big transformation. We can't accept decades of health inequalities, and the last 18 months, what that has shown everybody is there's a lot of work to do. And the new ICSs that are going to be transformed needs to be transformational. What we can't do is transfer one organisation to another and you've got the same outcomes. There has to be transformation at the heart of everything we do. And that needs to be needs-led. You know, where the greatest need is, we need to focus on that. Where the greatest risks are in terms of our communities, that we need to do better. And that's where we will maximise what the government ambition is for the ICSs. And we need to make sure we join up health and social care more effectively that benefits local people. Our housing stock, we've got it back in-house, and that's where our tenants and their voice matters. Crisis in housing supply is there nationally, and I'm really pleased that we've got a local plan that will be delivering the thousands of homes, that are greener homes, which will add quality of life and make sure that we actually have healthy communities. To do this, we need to seek out new ways how we engage our residents, have meaningful conversations. I'm really pleased that yesterday at Cabinet we did hopefully engage with residents, and that is just one example of how this council will listen and try and take on board everything we're doing. Despite having ambitious plans, we need to make sure we actually carry as many people with us as possible. And one way to do that is to relocate our staff. Again, the last 18 months, which has shown how we have managed to redeploy staff so fast and effectively where we needed to. And that's happened by commitment, passion and belief of not just elected members, but the fantastic staff we have. And we need to make sure we do more with that. This won't be easy. And I'm not going to pretend here that it's going to be easy. We do have challenges. A lot of the challenges we talked about earlier that are out of our control. But that doesn't mean to say that we have to shy away. That's why what I'm doing as an immediate measure to complement the plan is to make sure that the last 18 months, the examples we have seen, is to take that work forward. We need to put in extra resources in immediately to start to address the frontline environmental issues that we all know about. The frontline issues that you continuously bring forward to this council, we need to address them head on. Not next month, not next week, not tomorrow, but from today. There's a major impact that we need to have on our built environment, and we need to do that straight away. Mr. Mayor, the last 569 days since the first lockdown, communities have transformed, and the world's transformed, and Kirklees have transformed. That's right. That's why the vision for the future is so important. And that's why I've been thinking that we are in crisis mode, but I've always had an eye on what the future will hold. The future has got to be better.
20
and
seconds.
This plan will hopefully provide some hope. So, Mr. Mayor, without further ado, I'd welcome the council to fully engage and provide me with the views. And we need to make sure that we get behind this council plan. And once again, Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to thank our wonderful staff for all the hard work they've done and for the amount of effort they put in this plan, because they are the ones who have been grafting hard to make sure that this plan comes forward to this council. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
As you can see, we've got quite a few. Oh, is that seconded? Councillor Scott. So, as I was saying, as you can see, we've got quite a few speakers. Councillor John Taylor.
Mr. Mayor, and thank you to Shabir for introducing this item. This item came before one of the scrutiny panels, corporate scrutiny panel, I think, and I asked a question at that: who was this report written for? Sorry? Oh, sorry, Kathy. Who was this report written for? Because it's important to understand who the audience is when you're writing something, to understand how they will receive this information and how they will understand it. And I have a number of points which I'm going to whiz through to get through them in time. I did say at Cabinet yesterday that there were a number of typos and errors in here. I've not seen anybody pick up on any of them yet, so I will try and pick up on some of those as well. But first, I just want to reflect on something that Shabir said that I thought was really, really important, and when he was talking about community cohesion, and how we need to break down barriers and avoid creating division. However, I'm not convinced by that, because I think sometimes in an attempt to support some communities, we end up excluding others. And I've had this concern for a while now, and it comes through in here as well that, you know, if you're white and working class and you're from, be it Chickenley or Dewsbury Moor or something, you're not going to get the same level of support because you're not recognised as a community or a group that is important. And we bring forward proposals that will look at certain minority groups, but not look at the majority as well. And I think I would again stress that we should focus on what we have in common rather than our differences. And if we focus on what we have in common, then we look at everybody and try and address the issues that we do face in all communities, rather than doing a bit here for this community and a bit here for this community, which is one of my concerns. If I go into the detail, on page 6 under the vision, the first paragraph that's in bold, it mentions the last 18 council staff. So that's a typo. I'm sure it's something to do with 18 months, but we ought to be picking up on that. If I pick up on page 11, where we're talking about people, partners and place. And when we talk about place, we talk about place standard. As you'll know, I'm a huge advocate of place standard. And I will just share with you one example. I saw something on social media either today or yesterday, I can't remember, about Home Firth, and we've done a place standard engagement at Home Firth. And they were celebrating the fact we'd had 350 contributions. I got more than that in terms of contributions just in the village of Shepley when we did place standard properly. And I am worried, and I raised this yesterday, and I know that Cathy's taking it away, but we seem to be slipping backwards. Place standard is really valuable when we talk to people who don't want to talk to us. So 350 conversations will be online conversations with people who have a reason to come and tell us something. We need to be talking to the people who don't realise they have things to tell us. But as I say, I'm whizzing through this. When we look at shaped by people and places, I've struggled to find any reference in here to parish or town councils, and yet they are an active part of our democracy. I worry that I'm setting Councillor Bolt up here to wax lyrically about Mirfield Town Council, but again, we have Home Valley Parish Council at the moment is going through a referendum about their plan. These are important bodies that we actively engage with, but I can't find any reference to it anywhere here in our plan. So I think that is a shortcoming of the plan. There are other typos which I'm going to ignore, but I do think, as I said yesterday at Cabinet, it would be helpful if somebody read this end to end to pick up on them, actually read the statements because they don't make sense. As I said in an earlier speech this evening, when we look at sustainable economy on page 26, 27, it talks about the Levelling Up Fund for Batley, but makes no reference to the Levelling Up Fund for the Penistone line. So once again, the Penistone line is ignored by this council. And then, if we move to achieving our outcomes, on the first page of achieving our outcomes, there's a statement that says, however, Kirklees level figures do not show potentially significant and increasing inequalities between and within communities and places in Kirklees. I'm not sure that's what it meant to say. I think it means to say the opposite. It actually says it doesn't show any significant or increasing inequalities before communities, but I think you were wanting to say that it did. So again, perhaps if people can look at the detail and look at the wording. One thing I did want to pick up on.
20 seconds.
Yeah. All right. I'll go to the last one again. On page 31 of 32 in the appendix, when we're looking at efficient and effective governance and finance, you've repeated a paragraph, so it's actually in twice. So I think we ought to be picking up that. But a few points. I could have talked a lot longer if I had more time, but I know the Mayor's going to cut me off, so I'll finish there before he does. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. If members can remember, they've got 5 minutes to speak. So I will cut you off, yes. Councillor Cooper.
Obviously pleased to hear the emphasis on clean and green in the council plan. And I guess a little wry smile came to my face when I saw appoint principal designer for council's passive house pilot. For those of you who followed the council's business over the last 5 years, is it, since I first brought up the passive house scheme and about how that might actually be something that we might take up and look at, it's been one of those bones of contention which somehow or other has no progress has been made. One of the issues I have really is that it's a pilot. There's lots of places around the country where more work has actually gone on. Exeter, Norwich, York are building hundreds of passive houses around in their area. And so you look at this caution, you look at this, it takes 5 years to get a pilot project off the ground, and you think, how far behind the curve are we really? And are we really a leading authority in this area when we look at so many other councils who are doing so much better? So it's that caution, that timidity, all those sort of things which I have most concern about. And pleased to see tree planting. I'm pleased to see that happen. But we've got to be realistic about tree planting and realise that it will take decades before the impact of tree planting is actually going to have any significant impact on our carbon savings. And that's taken into account the fact that we've also got to stop doing other things. But the front line on climate change in Kirklees is the A629. It's that scheme. It's the over 100 trees which are going to be removed as a result of the council's scheme, the actions. And when you look at that scheme, and you look at some of the comments that have come in from the council's own tree officer, he says, with relation to this scheme, the proposals for the Blacker Road Junction and Cavalry Isle Junction are contrary to the Kirklees local plan policies, as they have a significant impact upon the character and setting of the area and will harm public amenity for many years. He also questions the carbon impact assessment. Replacement trees will take 50 years to provide the same benefit as existing trees, he says. So there's some real concern there, and he also casts doubt on the carbon impact assessment. And when you look at Kirklees Climate Commission's report into the council's own carbon impact assessment, the Kirklees Climate Commission, which is a critical friend of the council, concludes in summary, without an appraisal detailing the whole life benefits or disbenefits of the scheme, and without having a Kirklees-wide roadmap in place, setting out year-on-year emission savings, it's impossible to state whether any of the benefits predicted as part of the A629 will support Kirklees in meeting its objectives. So here, if you read through this document, it says basically that the carbon impact assessment that the council has put in its planning application is not worth the paper it's written on. And in fact, I believe one of the comments was, did you actually pay for this? And this is a critical friend, and I think Councillor McBride should read this and read it in detail that's come from the Climate Commission and see what that is. Because if this is to mean anything, it's got to be real. It's got to be realistic. It's got to be based in fact. And we've really got to take notice of the partners that we have, those people who we trust, those people who've actually gone to some effort to actually go into detail about this. We can't ignore it. And we have the Woodland Trust saying that the A629 scheme is actually something that goes against both national and local policy.
30 seconds.
So if we are going to be front runners in terms of greening up the country, if we are going to be the people who we say we are in terms of climate change, then we have got to take note of those of us who want to work with you to make that happen. This cannot be ignored or made to look like something it isn't.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Councillor Bolt.
Out of the mouths of babes and leaders. A while ago, Councillor Pandor said, words are not enough. And we will hold him to those words. Because as we look at this on page 124, we work with people. We don't do things to them. We had a lady from Home Firth reflecting on what was being done to her. We've had several deputations from people from Edgerton, the A629, reflecting on what's been done to them. Numerous people are complaining in Cleckheaton about what's being done to them, and some of them are complaining about the way in which it's been done. Again, we have people in Home Firth, the road scheme, people in Bradley were only yesterday saying what's being done to us, and they were still concerned. We heard about forgotten communities, and thanks to Councillor Taylor for teeing up reference to parish councils. I would remind this council that it signed a charter, a contract with town and parish councils, but it seems to forget that ad nauseam. Page 128, it talks about being efficient and effective. It works smart and delivers efficiently and effectively. And if we reflect on the climate emergency and the carbon impact, I would ask, what's the carbon impact of the roadworks that we're seeing on the A62, A644 at the moment, full resurfacing, in the full knowledge that Cabinet are passing a major reconstruction scheme which will come along in 2 to 3 years' time? Because, Mr. Mayor, this council employs a swathe of people to monitor and enforce the new Road and Street Works Act of 1991. Initially brought in to regulate utilities and people, within that, Table 6.1 of RASWA says a reconstructed road has a category where the duration of restriction prohibits anybody working on it, unless in emergency, for 5 years. We're going in less than 3, yet we criticise utilities who do the same. So let's work with people and not do things to them. The page 141, something I'd like to see on a regular council agenda. Councillor Firth, could you give us an update, please, on the actions of this council with regards to Network Rail's rough-shod attitude for the Transpennine route upgrade? We're launching a challenge against them, and I'd like to know how that's going, particularly for the communities of Murfield, Ravensthorpe, Deaton, Dalton, and others that are affected. Appendix 2 talks about safe and cohesive. People in Kirklees live in cohesive communities and feel safe. We heard earlier today from a lady who said that because of the actions of this Cabinet, she would no longer feel safe going home. It's not a matter of is she safe, it's a matter of does she feel, what's her perception? And we're seeing that by the actions of removing parking from her home area, she was saying that she would no longer feel safe. And we must take account of that. We must not do something to those people, we must work with them. Because Cabinet rode roughshod against residents in the Robertstown, Liversedge-Gummersall area when it removed parking outside their house. Understandably, it said legally they had no right to park outside their house, but it gave no consideration to how far those residents would have to go to walk home on a night when their parking had been displaced. Officers said they can park behind a former pub without looking to see that that former pub is now under new ownership and they had no rights to park there. They can park in adjacent streets without looking at the traffic flow of how they get there and how far it would take to walk. So we must look when we're doing things and work with people,
seconds.
not to them. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'll give Councillor Cooper 24 seconds of that if he wants.
Thank you, Councillor Bolt. Councillor Ramsey.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Panda, for introducing it. Certainly over the last 18 months, it's taken its toll on people. and on communities. And I believe that the actions within our council plan actually will help us to come back stronger. I think that it recognises that people genuinely want a say in how their community is supported and developed. And I'm very pleased that we've used the place-based standard tool locally in our area in Thornhill-Lees, and that's given us a real insight into what people really want, what the residents really want, and is enabling us to draw up an action plan to address those issues in partnership with residents. Our ambition is to use the same tool in our other communities within the ward, and as a councillor I found it particularly helpful to have that structure and the benefit of that tool. It supported in community, real community engagement, joined up working and us agreeing the priorities for the areas. So I know I've only picked one point, but I believe that the plan is right.
Thank you, Councillor Ramsey. Councillor Uppel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to pick up on some of the points Jackie did actually, and I think it is really important to see that we've got a co-produced ambition in the plan, which has been shaped by residents around how we make places what they are. That doesn't mean we're always going to get everything right, and it doesn't mean that residents will always agree with everything the council does, but it does show that we are trying to move to a co-producing model, which I think is really important. We've also used the words inclusion, kindness and pride. And I actually think that's I think that's a really good thing to do for the council actually and for this plan, because it is something that some people could laugh about and say what you're talking about kindness and pride for. But I think that's important in setting the tone for how this council will lead and its ambitions going forward. There's been some really good work during COVID, and I will say again, our frontline staff deserve so much support and applause from us really for what they did during such a difficult time during that period. The report talks about how 130 local mutual aid groups were established, and also we developed a community anchor network with the third sector. And I think that's really, really important, and I hope that does go forward, and I know that is presented in the report as well. And John, he's not here at the moment, but, and Jackie talked about the place standard. We've also used it in Ashbrow, and it's been really, really useful tool. Yesterday was a really interesting day for me. So, you know, as local councils, we have good days and bad days, don't we? But for me, yesterday was a really good day. And I was able to start the day with the mayor. It was really nice to see the mayor in Deaton yesterday morning. And we went to see a group called Aspire, who do a lot of work across the local authority. And in Deaton, in Chestnut, they run a group with over 55s, and it's mainly about tackling social isolation and improving people's mental health. And I heard, and I'm sure the mayor did as well, we heard some amazing stories about the work that they're doing. We heard about social prescribing. We heard from one gentleman about how he joined the group, really struggled with depression, was on antidepressants. He was referred through his GP, and he was able to meet people, get involved in arts and crafts, and now he's come off the antidepressants because of the work of that group. Now we've been able to fund that group through the Place Partnership funding, through the We Evolve funding, you know, which is brilliant. So it shows some of the stuff that the council is already doing, working with communities. We were also, in the evening, myself and James, my ward colleague, we met with a youth panel in Ashbrow that's been established by the local community groups. And we had a lot of young people demanding change on issues around estate management. So Cathy, I'll probably be coming to see you about that, about the roads, but also about tackling violence against women and girls. And it was really good to see a group of young people getting involved in you know, council issues as well. And again, we've been able to support some of those projects through our Place Partnership work and through our local ward budgets. So again, there's some really, really good work going on. And quite clearly people want to be involved and they want to have a say in the decisions that are made in their lives and in their communities. I think the wider system, we do need to do a bit better at enabling that, but I'm really glad to see that the council is moving forward on this. And just on John's point on inclusion, you know, the report is littered with what we're trying to do around inclusion. And I think we want to support all communities. That doesn't mean we always have the same approach for every community. It might mean that we have different approaches, but I don't think this is saying that we're not supporting working class communities. And I'm sure Kathy would want to say about what we want to be doing about people in Kirklees as well. And, you know, quite clearly in the report, it talks about what we're trying to do with low-income people through family hub proposals, through trying to tackle the attainment gap, and that will support all our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Uppal. Councillor Zaman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Adult social care is important. We all want people to live their lives confidently, independently, with dignity. Social care is something that touches people in such difficult circumstances with emotional and intimate ways. Some of the achievements in adult social care that we have, despite the challenges of the pandemic within adult social care, has progressed with pace. I want to highlight just a few of the achievements over this last year. Kirklees was selected as one of the 7 pilot sites in the UK to be an urgent community response accelerator site. This enabled us to test out ways in which we can enhance our work to avoid people needing to be admitted to hospital by providing a rapid health and social care response. Kirklees won a national award for the Best Procurement Delivery Local Government category. This was for the Kirklees Better Opportunities Partnership, implemented with a new approach on developing outcome-based payment contracts and adopting new ways of working with complex social problems. Kirklees launched My Care Account. This is a new online service platform for users and carers in Kirklees that will help take control of their social care needs. In response to the mental health difficulties due to the pandemic, Kirklees extended its online health support to the wider community. The Brain In app is available to anyone living in Kirklees who may need that little extra help managing anxiety and mental health. Kirklees has also made significant progress with delivery of Adult Social Care Capital Programme. Kirklees opened the new respite facilities in Shepley, which offer short stays to adults with learning disabilities and associated support in order to give their family carers a break. A new housing development was opened in Batley for people with learning disabilities and autism. Mayman Lane includes 6 single-storey self-contained bungalows, staff accommodation and training facilities. The bungalows were designed to help people with complex support needs to live as independently as possible within the community. Work is underway to re-provision the existing dementia day facilities in Mirfield and Almondbury and develop extra care housing in the borough. Kirklees is piloting a wellness on wheels health checks. This allows the service to access hard-to-reach communities across the borough in order to improve healthcare outcomes for all. This is a massive agenda, but we are all on a journey towards high-quality care for all service users in Kirklees, ensuring their needs are met. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Zaman. Just to inform people, I'm drawing a line on the list, closing the list at Councillor Scott, after Councillor Scott, and of course Councillor Panda will have a right of reply. Councillor Pattison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I obviously want to talk about the Aspire and Achieve section that we have in the council plan. I mean, obviously, we want all people in Kirklees to aspire and achieve their ambitions through education, training and employment and lifelong learning. And in particular, we want people in Kirklees to have access to the highest quality, and John, if you're still here, or no, you've disappeared, inclusive education, inclusive learning and education provision. And that is so important that they have that access. The aspirations are completely right, and progress has been made over the last 18 months, and I'm sure will continue to be made. Our attainment levels of our children in schools, in our colleges, are rising above the national average. Though, of course, not progress has been delayed, but COVID has meant that we haven't been able to measure that progress in the normal way. But all evidence is that despite COVID, despite all the efforts that schools have had to put in to maintain educating our children over the last 18 months, progress by individual children has been made. And our staff, our teachers, and all the other staff in schools have to be applauded for what they've done, grappling with the virus to keep that attainment level up. But I really worry, and I dearly hope, that this progress is not going to be undermined and that our young people will suffer and face setbacks in theirs and their families and their communities' aspirations, their expectations of their achievements in life. And this isn't because of COVID, as I say. Our staff have worked valiantly in the face of COVID. But it is because now some of our basic services that support our schools, I mean, no child can go to school unless there's transport for school, unless the schools are cleaned, unless they're fed at lunchtime, unless their buildings are maintained. And just to give you an example of some of the problems that we're now facing, before I give you an example, let me just say, our staff, again, in all those services that provide that safe and secure environment for our children are doing an absolutely valiant job using imagination and initiative to ensure that our children's education is continuing. But I am fearful that that might not. And just to give you an example of that, HGV drivers. Now, you might just instantly think, well, it's about school food, school meals, and then we're not being able to get the food into our schools to feed our children. That's a possibility, though, again, our staff have worked really valiantly to make sure that that's not happening. But school transport. What's happening with school transport? And again, our staff are doing really good jobs to make sure school transport continues. But anybody with a public services vehicle license is now being tempted away to drive an HGV because the government is saying, up the wages of HGV drivers. So PSV drivers, who are lower down the pecking order in terms of wages, are moving off to being HGV drivers. Great for them, but where does that leave our children that can't get to school and our staff that are valiantly trying to do that? We have, as I say, our staff are making sure our children are in school. But it's no thanks to this government that that's happening. So, and why is this happening? It's not because of COVID, it's because of Brexit, isn't it? It's all those shortages that how the government has now mismanaged everything that's happened post-Brexit. So,
15 seconds.
Thank you. I just really hope that all that effort that all our staff and our children and their families have put into maintaining their aspirations will continue, despite this government.
Thank you, Councillor Pattison. Councillor Paul Davies.
I think something that's particularly exciting about this council plan is, as I understand it, this is the first time we've seen cabinet priorities within the plan. So what we have is a link to what we are driving forward in cabinet, complete transparency and a view on the strategic leadership that we are pushing forward on. And of course, that means we're accountable. You know, we're not hiding. It's there for everybody to see. We will be accountable for delivery against those priorities. So in my area, when I talk about an inclusive procurement strategy and taking that forward to help us with community wealth building, I will certainly make myself accountable for that delivery and ensuring that we make a difference in our communities. When I talk about digital inclusion and the strategy that we develop in and the implementation plans, that will be transparent and people will be able to judge my portfolio, myself as a cabinet member, on that delivery. So I think that's one point that perhaps hasn't been picked up, or maybe not picked up by other people. But key to me throughout this plan is it's all about community. It's all about our citizens. It's how we connect, not just with them, how they connect with us. It's about partnership and collaboration. And I am extremely grateful to Councillor Boat for bringing up the Holmfirth Road scheme. I know he has a particular view, which I'm sure is based on what he thinks is good information, but actually the Holmfirth Road scheme is an absolutely fantastic example of how we connected with our community. We run through, and Councillor McBride has to take credit for this, we ran an extensive consultation period. This is before I was a councillor, actually I was a parish councillor at the time. We had 2,500 citizens in Holmfirth respond. Unprecedented. Nobody has ever seen that before. So don't tell me that we can't connect with communities. That's without all the hits on the website, that's without other contacts. This was done not just online, it was face-to-face, there were connections with community groups. You could see people growing in self-esteem and confidence, people coming forth with all sorts of ideas. Councillor McBride's the cabinet member, given assurance he would listen to that. He listened to it, and a major scheme was absolutely changed completely. So the current road scheme that we have is as a result of this extensive consultation, community involvement and engagement. It represents feedback from those people. So as I said, I'm really grateful to Councillor Boat. It's a shame he's not here at the moment for raising that. I'm sure he'll be really glad. Oh, he's there, sorry. I missed you. I was looking at John Taylor. My apologies. Yourself and John just interchangeable, so I keep missing the two. I'm very sorry. My apologies. I know. She's variofocals. That's the problem.
Can you stick to the and stop talking across the floor, please?
Of course, Mr. Mayor. But genuinely, I am very happy that that's been raised. I think it gives us, it's not the only template, but certainly it gives us a form of template on which we can build working in our place and how we respect the views of our citizens and work with them in a collaborative way. The issue, and I think it's really unfortunate, this issue of the term white working class being raised in the context of this plan. I've no problem with talking about white working class. I think as many of you know, that's my background, and where I come from. So I particularly know a little bit about it, I guess, in that sense. So a bit like Councillor Boat is an expert on cycling, maybe you could call me an expert on being a son of a miner and having worked underground myself. So maybe, that counts for something. However, throughout this plan, we talk about
30
all
seconds.
of our citizens, all of our children, and I'll say the last thing about our children. It is a tragedy that in the last 10 years, we have seen our children deprived of life opportunities and the ability to meet their aspirations. This plan is about doing something to actually help with that and redress the balance. There is no differentiation in how we look at our citizens and our children, and I think it's disingenuous to start trying to put that into this plan when it doesn't exist.
Councillor Burke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Pandor, for presenting your plan and your vision to us. It would have been nice, I think, for me personally and perhaps others here to have had perhaps some kind of meaningful involvement and engagement in that process. Some admirable shared outcomes shaped by people, safe and cohesive, clean and green. Safe and cohesive, I think the Safe for Kirklees team, who myself and my colleague Councillor Anthony Smith have had many engagements with, worked tremendously well under a lot of pressure and add a lot of value to our communities and helping us carry out the work that we do to support our residents. Clean and green, again, some very good ambitions there. More to do with locally about bringing forward those tree planting schemes and how we can be involved. We've brought forward a petition. We'd like some feedback on that. And that comes down to, I suppose, more about listening to us as elected members for our areas and also the residents who bring forward these to us and who we work with and share their values. Shaped by people, we make our places what they are. I think more you make our places what they are, unfortunately, sometimes. Sometimes by hampering and hindering our ambitions for our communities, our areas, and our ward, because people matter to us, and we want to represent the people of our areas the best we can. We bring forward ideas, suggestions, opportunities, and ambitions for where we live, representing our residents the best we can, myself and ward colleagues. And we're often hampered and held back and restricted in doing that. And that's unfortunate and it's a shame. And there's nobody to blame for that, only the people who make the decisions at that cabinet level, continuously being ignored. And that doesn't share your aspirations for Shaped by People. People should feel valued, it says on page 130, page 16 of the report. People should feel valued, respected, involved and listened to. That's certainly not the case for a lot of residents who I represent and who come to me and my colleagues looking for support, looking for help and looking for us to be able to make a difference to them. And that's just the honest truth of it. More of us feel included, respected, listened and able to contribute. And that again is on page 16 or 130 of that report. To feel included, again, there's a lack of inclusion when it comes to people and residents in our areas. Being respected, so they're valued. So their opinion is valued, listened to, and they get coherent responses, and people work to try and do things for our residents, not straight away come up with reasons and ways of not being able to help and support our residents. Most times when I and send an email or contact council inquiries, the first thing I get back is a long, detailed explanation of why something cannot be done. There's never anything positive. I urge and I beg for some kind of positive outcome. It may not be the outcome we want, but I want people to try. I want people to listen so that our communities feel valued, respected and listened to, and the contributions of that as well. Also on that page, on page 16, we recognise that different communities have different needs. They absolutely do, and I hope again that you could listen to us. And part of this, I suppose, comes to the petition that I presented earlier on about having a strategic plan for our villages. Because Councillor Pandor said he's not forgotten our villages. Disappointed he left out Linley. And also having an eye on the future. That comes again to understanding the needs and perspectives of our areas and where we live. We've seen an awful lot of development and houses being built in the Linley area, which is fine. We need affordable houses, we need appropriate housing in the right places for our communities. Absolutely fine. But let's think ahead. Let's have that eye on the future, Councillor Pandor, as you mentioned. And let's think about the infrastructure that's needed to deal with hundreds of new houses in communities. Let's think about our roads, let's think about our schools, let's think about our footpaths, our doctors, our dentists, and all of that infrastructure that's needed, and our parks and clean spaces, so that we can truly be shaped by our people and listen, and so that we as elected members and the residents that we represent feel valued. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burke. Councillor Smage.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A lot of what's in the corporate plan, I hope, will be coming to scrutiny, the various scrutiny panels. I would like a lot to come for pre-decision scrutiny. So I don't want to dwell too much on specific projects to be able to give that scrutiny process a non-political chance. But I do want to just ask a few points, really. Picking up on the feeling listened to. If we're going, there's a lot about engagement, but there's not a lot about listening to and actioning what people say. And people need to feel that when they've been asked, that there is some action, and that things don't go into the council's processes and take years to come out the other end. that in actual fact people are actively listening to them across Kirklees. The urban green spaces are mentioned, and I noticed that Dewsbury and Huddersfield blueprints and master plans are mentioned, but we've got lots more urban green spaces, and they are just as important as Dewsbury and Huddersfield. And I'm also disappointed that when you mention about green flags, Oakwell's not mentioned. You've got all sorts of green flags in there, but you haven't got that Oakwell's got a Green Heritage Site accreditation and has been having green flags for years. And neither of you mentioned about East Biley getting theirs, but never mind. And Councillor Pandor, there are more centres in Kirklees that need help. Smaller centres, including Birstall. But I want to come on to the health and social care. I'm not going to dwell on the part that mentions about good quality nutrition, because as you probably can see, I mastered gluten-free baking. So maybe I'm not the person to talk about that. But in scrutiny, you can't help understanding, when you've done as many reconfiguration scrutinies as I have, you can't help understanding the interdependencies between all parts of a whole system. And a whole system is primary, secondary, tertiary. It is about mental health, it is about community services, and it is about social care. But it is also about that low-level help that we as a council can give to help people get back to where they were, so that they don't need social care as quickly. And that is why some of these items, when you're talking about individuals, informal support, it is so important that they work. Because otherwise, we've talked before about a social care cliff in council. And if we don't get that help right now, we don't know what demand is coming along as a result of the pandemic. But interdependencies, not only in health and social care, there are also interdependencies on health inequalities and well-being. Health and well-being go together, as many of you will know. And therefore it is important that the council provides those services that help people with their well-being as well as with their care. And just because a service doesn't necessarily have a label on it
20 seconds.
that is to do with health, all services help contribute to people's well-being. And I would hope that the inequalities, etc., health and social care will not forget about the well-being as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smage. Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think we've heard some really good stuff tonight, actually, if I'm absolutely honest. I've heard the leader introduce this debate with some really positive stuff, talking about dedication, commitment, motivation, energy, passion, belief, all great stuff. And also acknowledging we can do better, which I think is absolutely right. We've talked about big strategic stuff, transport and things like that. And we've heard about the need to engage with residents, and I'll come back to that. And some of the other councillors as well. Councillor Davis saying it's all about the people, and the comments about it's about what we're doing for people and not doing to them. And on all this absolutely resonates with me. And in particular, looking at things like Councillor Burke said there about, let's have some positivity, let's have some results, let's have something that comes back. And I really think that's the way that we do need to be thinking. And I'm really pleased to see these kind of phrases coming into our thinking now. Now, turning to the specifics of the plan, actually, I sat down and I've compared this quite closely with last year, and it's clear that it's moved on. The leader talks about having a plan to communicate what we're doing. I would take slight issue with that. I think a report communicates what you're doing. I think a plan actually is the way that you deliver what you're doing. And it's clear to me that there's been a lot of work gone into this plan. There's been quite a lot of thought gone into it. And I do think that the plan is improving and progressing year on year, not only in terms of the content of it, but actually the way it is presented. And one of the things that I'm particularly keen on, and this really follows on from some comments that I made at the last meeting about energising the council, looking forward and so forth, and driving service delivery, is that the new version of the plan actually seems to now set specific measurable targets with dates and so forth. And again, somebody's been responsible for putting that in, and I give them credit. I think that's definitely the way to go, because that then enables better benchmarking of what we're doing and how we're delivering on the plan. So again, I see some real positives in both the plan and the way we're thinking. There is one area that I think we could possibly do better on, and that's the section that talks about efficient and effective Kirklees. And again, I think those are key words in terms of what we do as a council. Those people that vote for us and those people that pay their council tax every year would presumably want an efficient and effective council that delivers services efficiently and effectively. And what we've got here is a section of this report that specifically deals with that. But in the other sections, there's quite a lot of data on the feedback and the measuring of how we're delivering, how we've delivered on last year. Whereas in this section, actually, there's not a lot there in terms of data. And I think what would be really interesting would be, rather than just looking at objective statistical data, would be actually to really engage with some of the people who've actually used our services and had things hopefully done for them, not to them. Not in the sense that if you go online, you get a quick tick box questionnaire, how do you rate us 5 stars, all that kind of stuff. But really have some conversations with people. And I can give you a couple of examples. I talked about, at the last meeting, about a lady who, with dementia who'd not had a shower for a long time. I've recently been dealing with a case for a lady who's had issues with her gas fire. Now, it must have been around last Christmas that my wife lent her a fan heater. And since then, we've been trying desperately with the housing people, K&H, to try and get her fire sorted out, her gas fire sorted out. It's just been resolved. Today, I've had a report that this fire's been delivered. Now, actually, you probably couldn't ask that lady, because I think she might struggle to give us some meaningful feedback. But for me, that's a real problem. The fact that people are not getting those fast, positive outcomes in service delivery. At the last meeting, I was going to put a question to the Leader of the Council, but we ran out of time, unfortunately. The question was, does the Leader of the Council hold the opinion that Kirklees is providing a good standard of service to the council taxpayers of Kirklees? And the answer, unsurprisingly, was yes. Okay. My question to the Leader to think about really would be, and look at it in the context of this report, is how do you measure that? What are the metrics? What are those people, like that lady and the gas fire, how are we knowing that they're getting a good service? And I think this plan actually could be a good tool to do that and to report on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Simpson. Yeah, it's Councillor Simpson next. On my list, it's Councillor Simpson.
My apologies, John, but I do as the Mayor says. Yeah. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, particularly for letting me jump in the queue. I want to begin by addressing, before I say what I sort of wanted to say, by addressing Councillor Cooper's comments. I do like Councillor Cooper. I won't say that we're best friends. We're not Facebook friends yet. That could be something that we sort out. But I do like him, and I think he often has valuable contributions to give, which I listen to. But that's why I think it's disappointing when we get the politicking rather than the facts. I think it's absolutely fine and respectable and the right of anyone to come to their own view, but you're not entitled to your own facts. And what we've heard in a lot of, from what Councillor Cooper said about the A629 was politicking and spinning. And, you know, you wouldn't need to spin it if you were that confident of it being as black and white as has been suggested. Contrary to what Councillor Cooper suggested, the Climate Commission isn't opposing nor supporting, I admit, the scheme. We're working with the Climate Commission closely and constructively, and we welcome their support in working towards our ambitious plans for carbon neutrality by 2038. However, there is a committee that's supporting the scheme. It's actually one that Andrew sits on. It's the Joint Health Scrutiny Committee that Andrew's a member of, and their transport group, which supported the proposals to make sure that we have better transport between our hospitals, which is obviously a necessary part of making sure that our residents are able to access the health services that they need as we undergo a reconfiguration. And Andrew does sit on that panel, I'm afraid. And regarding the trees, the carbon impact of the trees, we have a net benefit of around 2,000 tonnes of carbon sequestration from the proposals over 30 years, and that has a net gain crossover point within 3 years due to the way that the scheme is being phased. Not some mystery decade, as was suggested by Councillor Cooper, and that's using the Forestry Commission's tool. So if he has any issues with that, he can take it up with the Forestry Commission. Regarding what I was hoping to say, which is about the things that are under my name in the report, I think it's a really, really positive report, and I've welcomed the contributions from all the councillors, opposition and my own group thus far. I think what the report shows is that we don't just want to recover, we want to grow, we want to be better, and in my view, we want to regenerate through culture. And on the culture side of my brief, we have destination marketing, which is about adding a new dimension to the way that we communicate and we promote our borough, so that we're not just doing, communicating via press release. We're going to take an innovative approach to making sure that we're selling Kirklees and attracting people to Kirklees and promoting our visitor economy to benefit our residents and our businesses. So that's why we're launching a new website and an app for Creative Kirklees as a phase 1 introduction of destination marketing. We're producing a tourism strategy to establish priorities for development and marketing of the visitor economy in Kirklees. And we plan, of course, as I'll be talking about shortly, to deliver a successful year of music and put Kirklees on the map. And I really do think that is something that has the potential to deliver opportunities for our residents and growth for local businesses. Moving to the climate things that are in my portfolio, of course, one of the key things here is to develop the climate change roadmap to 2038. I recently had the pleasure of attending the Overview and Scrutiny Management Committee to talk about the progress that we've made with regard to our climate ambitions, and was really pleased to have those discussions, and really enjoyed the warm and welcoming reception and even the positive comments that we got even from Andrew Cooper about the steps that we've taken thus far on our carbon journey. And just to report those back, Andrew suggests that the A629 is the new frontier of the battle for climate. Well, actually, the frontier for our battle to make sure that we meet our carbon neutrality targets is here in our climate change roadmap. And what we've done thus far is beaten our targets. We had a target of a 40% reduction by last year in our carbon emissions. We achieved a 53.5% reduction as a baseline, and we will be going even further. We've got a lot more to do. I haven't been able to say everything I wanted to say due to responding to Andrew's comments, but there is a lot of positive things in here, and I appreciate everyone's comments, and I'm sure that we'll all deliver it together. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Simpson. Councillor Lawson is next. Just want to make a little point there. When you're referring to other councillors in the chamber, refer to them as Councillor Cooper. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Pandor, for your presentation, and thanks to the officers' work that's gone into this. There's much to agree with in the plan. There's much to sort of get on board with, and indeed, a lot of the work that's been listed over the past 18 months, the Liberal Democrats have been involved with things like volunteering, etc. We've been getting stuck into that. Just a couple of comments to make really about a couple of aspects. I mentioned low-income families in the last item, and of course the two items, that one and this one, are related. Myself and a team of the Lib Dem in the Lib Dem group have been following the work of Dr. Ruth Patrick in York University, working with Birmingham University. Their project, COVID Realities, has been taking qualitative evidence from families throughout the pandemic. Listening to them brings a couple of things into sharp focus. It's become clear that these families face a special set of challenges in any recovery scenario. Not only do they face the truism that it's expensive to be poor, with things like access to supermarkets being limited and so on, but the economic climate in the immediate future and in the longer term is working against them. In the short term, it's predicted that there could be an economic damage of anything up to 10% of GDP. In the short term, it's not predicted to be as much, but it's called permanent economic scarring. I don't know how many of you are familiar with that term, but it's pretty much considered inevitable. That inevitability and that permanence makes it cumulative. So it's not just over the next couple of years, it's forever. This matters because it's well known that these families are the least able and least equipped to take advantage of any economic recovery, and that their recovery is always slower and comes back to a lower level than the wider population. With a permanent reduction in the economy, there's a very real ceiling for these families. In the short term, we can all see how the removal of universal credit uplift is making life difficult for many. According to Citizens' Advice, the benefit has been returned to the 2013 level to take people into the 2022 year. Fuel and food prices are up, and there is a significant rise in the use of local food banks, something that me and Councillor Scott have been talking about recently. It's a very worrying trend. In the British Medical Journal a fortnight ago, there was a study published which detailed the increased nutritional anemia in Yorkshire, especially in children presenting with malnutrition when testing for leukemia and similar diseases. I brought this to the attention of our PHE, Rachel, who has already had sight of the study, and it was reassuring that it's in view. The cause was suspected that the children that had been lost sight of because they weren't attending school or mixing with extended families who would normally be expected to provide extra meals that perhaps wouldn't be seen. It's hoped that this, as lockdowns continue to ease, that this will improve. I can't help feeling, though, that just as we talk about catch-up in education, there's a swift piece of work that needs to be done around this issue. And I think the plan that we've got is good, but does it take care of the firefighting that's right in front of us that we must address before we write off a plan and go, right, that's it, it's taken care of. Finally, on the report itself, I note that there hasn't been any public involvement in the making of this part of the plan today. I feel that's a mistake. This looks like a plan that's going to be presented to people rather than designed by them. I can only hope that it's what's called a living document and will be flexible enough to accommodate the working with part of it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Lawson. Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Taylor, from what you said, I think you misunderstand what community cohesion is about. It's not about supporting minority groups at the detriment of everybody else, which you appear to imply. It's about drawing upon what we have in common. Your comments perpetuate a myth that divides communities further. And I would say as politicians, we have a responsibility to community cohesion and facilitating that. Councillor Smage, I can assure you we use public health intelligence to inform policy and strategy when tackling health inequalities. We fully recognise the impact of emotional health on physical health and vice versa. The adult social care vision places people at the centre of service organisation rather than people having to fit around organisational structures, but we have to call services something. So it may appear as if they're separate, but they're not. There is that full recognition that people as whole human beings, their emotional well-being and their physical well-being are interrelated. Now, given the funding crisis mentioned earlier by colleagues in adult social care, it's imperative that we do everything that we can to reduce pressures on health and adult social care and improve people's quality of life. Our adult social care health priorities in the plan support our ambitions to help people in Kirklees to live as well as possible for as long as possible, no matter where they live. We want people in Kirklees to be able to live their lives confidently, in better health and for longer. Preventing problems and supporting people early will help people choose healthier lifestyles and increase physical and mental health and well-being. The pandemic has rapidly accelerated the decline in residential care use. We are responding to a changing landscape in the care market. Creating a sustainable care market includes alternatives to residential care, improved respite day centre facilities, greater use of assistive technology, adaptations and increased awareness of the need to try and ensure that staff pay, particularly in the independent sector, reflects the value of the work that social care staff deliver. We need to create inclusive communities in which the design of housing and the built environment actively promotes independence for older people and people with disabilities. At the heart of this is the belief in the social model of disability, which recognise that it's the environment in which people live that reduces independence rather than the condition that someone is living with. A simple example is that a ramp and automatic doors enables everyone to access a building, someone using a wheelchair or a baby in a pushchair compared with a set of steps. The same is true of good housing design, dementia-friendly signage and layouts, etc. We are advocating for citizens and communities on part of the development of the new integrated health and care arrangements in Kirklees, particularly to reduce inequalities. To achieve our aspirations, we need to leverage the opportunities that come from working as a whole council and a wider system rather than just that come from being individual services. And this is in recognition that there's a multitude of things that impact on people's health outcomes. And this is about focusing on the outcomes we want to see as a council. We need to promote access to urban green space to increase physical activity and mental well-being through both high-quality environments and the promotion of their use, particularly by those currently less likely to do so. During the pandemic, many people rediscovered their local environment and the benefits of walking and cycling on physical and mental health.
30 seconds.
There isn't, however, equal access to green space across Kirklees in terms of location, quality of green spaces and the confidence of individuals to use the spaces that are available. We need to address this so that everyone's health benefits, and I hope that explains that, Councillor Smidge.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. Councillor Ahmed.
I better watch my knee, Mr. Mayor. Got dodgy knee. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm pleased that the council is delivering on an ambitious Our Council plan. I wanted to talk about the significant investment and regeneration that's already taken place and is currently taking place in areas such as Batley, Cleckheaton, Holmfirth town centres. But I wanted to focus on Dewsbury and Huddersfield. Increase housing and economic growth through projects in Chidswell and Dewsbury South Riverside, where 3,500 homes are planned over the next decade or so. I just wanted to focus on something that Councillor Smidge and Councillor Watson talked about, that we're not listening to communities. Actually, we are listening to communities. We've just done a consultation in Thorny Lees, which my colleague Councillor Ramsey talked about, listening to Thornley Lees, and we got 200 and, if I can get my figure right, 265 questionnaires back with what people want, and now we're putting an action plan together to look at what we can do with that particular community in relation to the riverside development. Develop the areas as a strategic employment location within the Leeds City region. This is Dewsbury. Build on the fantastic transport links on both road and railway, M1 and M62 across Pennine Rail. Develop a town centre that is fully utilised through increased housing, leisure provision with consolidated retail and commercial co-op. And I know the leader touched upon this earlier on about the significant investment Dewsbury is having. I also want to talk about schools, and in terms of two particular schools that are having significant investment and obviously rebuild. Woodley School and College Special School is to be rebuilt, a new CNI autism special school building on the site of the old Almonry Community School. Joseph Norton Academy Special School to be rebuilt, a new SEMH special school building on the old Deaton School site. Both of these will be new build, and they have just recently been agreed at Cabinet with a total cost of 36 million, which is again a significant investment. There will be the state-of-the-art provision. These are ambitious plans and very real opportunities to invest in the state-of-the-art school buildings that will be new homes for our schools that make the wonderful provision for our children and young people. We can see the opportunities that the brand new school buildings can bring for Joseph Norton Academy and Woodley School and College to meet the needs of some of our most vulnerable learners, and how together we can do that locally within Kirklees. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ahmed. Councillor Kendrick, please.
Councillor Watson said there's some good stuff in this plan. I've come to tell you about some more good stuff, and it's about children and young people. And I know every single one of you in this room, whether you're a councillor or you work for this authority, will be interested because you're all corporate parents. I keep reminding everybody of this. What the heck does it mean? It means you should take an interest. It means you should ask questions. It means you should challenge, and it means you should help out. So we're really looking at page 133 of the report in your pack as such. And I really just want to focus on the three slots that are there because there's so much more behind those sentences. So improve the number of places for young people to go. It's young people to go to and things to do is what we're talking about. That's overseen by the Youth Development Programme Board. And this is about really building on what's available in communities already and adding to it, adding value. Work is underway about bringing together and identifying everything that local sports clubs, community groups, the voluntary sector, third sector, even private provision provide locally. Because actually, the number of times people in my walk say, well, there's nothing for my Johnny to do. And then I say, have you thought about Cycle Speedway? Have you thought about Petanque? Have you thought about, you know, and on and on? And they go, oh, no, I didn't know about any of those. So all those things may not be what every young person wants, but it's about pulling those together, but also investing in that provision as well. We're providing funding for groups to bid to. You know, you'll get groups who'll say, oh, I'd love to, you know, do more, be able to provide this session for this group of children or young people, but we can't because whatever. So there's a fund for groups to bid to. It's been in use for a little while, especially in the school holidays. School holiday provision is something that we all appreciate, and also very particularly for families with children, young people with special educational needs. And of course, I hope all councillors are aware of our detached youth workers. who have been very effective, and we intend to see that develop more. And if you're familiar with the budget, I'm looking round, don't yawn, you will see in the capital part of the budget there is funding there to build 2 new centres, big centres, to provide a whole range of things, one in the north and the south. I want more, but I'll settle for 2 for now. For our young people to go to, not just about sports and activities, but about how you plan out your life, if you want to be an entrepreneur, if you want training, skills, direction, advice, whatever it is. So behind improving the number of places to go for young people, there's an awful lot of stuff there. But move on to improve targeted early support available in local places. The deliverable looks really sad. Provide support for families through our integrated Families Together, and it says in our Family Hubs offer, so we know what. So just learn now, Families Together is in place of Family Hubs, and it isn't just about the 4 children's centres that still exist. The key thing about this is about identifying local places where people can access, go to naturally, would be good. And I hope already, it certainly happened in my ward, but I hope in other wards, ward councillors are being contacted about, what have you got in your ward? What are the places that people could use? Is it a church hall? Is it a community centre?
25 seconds.
Good grief, doesn't time fly? So it's about that. And about early support, that's not Kirklees, that's a whole congregation of organisations in partnership providing early support. And we've invested as a council in this very heavily, and it means we have less children who are looked after by this authority, because lots of issues are being, if you like, nipped in the bud, supports provided so that families can stay together. Absolutely important. I've tons and tons I could say to you, but I can tell
You haven't got time, you've run out.
the mayor is going to throw me out. I may dramatically fall on the floor and keep talking. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Mather.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As a resident, I feel quite comfortable with our council plan, especially the sections on value, inclusion, priority actions and outcomes for our residents. It's not just words, it's not just talk, it's a living document, and I can prove what we are doing in terms of our portfolios. And you know, you can carry on by saying it doesn't have this and it doesn't include that. Reports can at best only give overview of, with a few examples. It doesn't necessarily mean, as Councillor Kendrick said, nothing's happening behind that. There is lots of work going on. So in relation to my area on clean and green, you will find by looking at page 144, 145 and cross-reference to council budget, page 46, that we are investing £2 million in our frontline services to recovery approaches, simply because we recognise COVID impacts are going to be long-term, and we need to invest to actually catch up to where we should be. And when we're talking about cleaner and greener, everybody wants the best possible life chances, and I think our environment is one of those areas. If you want to look at the long list of other things that we are doing, we're also looking at reuse shops, working in partnership with the community to reuse no longer loved items. 2 shops over the borough, good for our climate agenda, I would say, and support to our communities to have access to low-cost items which are being recycled. Residents bring their no longer loved items to the reuse shop, and it is sold onto residents who need them. The green parking permit is in place, so we are delivering, again, good for climate and air quality. We have delivered, or about to finish delivering, the LED street lighting schemes by March 2022. So when opposition says it's just words, I believe there's lots of action. So, for example, Councillor Cooper, you can get trees to function within 2 years. So, for example, you don't have to just plant saplings. You can get trees that have been growing for 10 years to supplement and start working within 2 years. So I think just because you don't like what you see doesn't necessarily mean that's the truth. So I'm telling you, we can make things work. And as for, inclusion, for me, when in this council and part of this cabinet is about delivering to all our residents, it isn't about by naming one, you're excluding the rest. You are actually delivering. So I think this document has lots going for it. We have lots of plans. We are delivering and we will continue to deliver, and we need everybody on board. And as Councillor Kendrick just said, we will listen and we will continue to listen. And Councillor Burke, I believe our councillors are at the heart of our plan. We will listen to them when they come and say, this is what our communities want. Our listening exercise in Waterloo has proven that. We will listen and then come back and decide how we're going to deliver to them. But we need to come and have those conversations rather than just say when we're delivering our council plan that this is happening and we haven't been listened to. So I welcome colleagues coming and speaking to me about their
10
plans
seconds.
for the environment. Thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And can I just say, it's been great tonight. I've valued all your contributions that you've made, and I've noted it. I think it's worthy of some of your things being listened to and took forward, because, as we say, it's our council plan, but it doesn't mean to say it can't be added into some of the things. So I'd like to talk to you. I'm going to do it slightly different. I want to talk to you about the priorities, and I've said it to you before. We want to make a difference to people's lives in Kirklees. Everyone should have a safer, comfortable living conditions, decent homes, affordable homes across all tenures. It's our responsibility to ensure that the properties we have are compliant and assist others, even in private sector, to ensure that they're safe too. This means keeping tenants safe, and there's as a main priority, and there's over 22,000 council properties I'm talking about. So with the tragedy of Grenfell, we've had to look at our own provision, and we've really gone into this. We've looked at the tower blocks, we've consulted, listened to tenants on some major decisions for the future. The tenant's voice has been key to this. We have to ensure that there's robust governance arrangements, and we've put in place a housing panel, including clear and effective roles of all panel members. That's capturing the tenants' voices, and it can only support a better delivery of our service if they're at the heart of it. I know you agree it's about making our homes great. We've also got to ensure that we've got a housing supply, and we're going to come across a lot of major decisions that we're going to make, and sometimes we might not like them, but you'll have your voice and you'll ensure people will be heard. There's also the review and the improvement of the adaptation policy and process. Now, if you've ever tried to navigate that, we do tend to have a lot of people worried about what's going to happen when things go change in their life. We want to reach out across Kirklees and make this inclusive to everybody and as many people as possible. We want to allow them to remain in their own homes and living independently and with dignity. We want to oversee the delivery of the place standard engagement and establish ward partnerships across Kirklees. We want to work alongside the voluntary and community sector to create a very good relationship and look at the best way of delivering our outcomes with them supportive of it and with us. Champion a place-based approach in the council business and ensuring our policies reflect one size doesn't fit all. Each place is unique and it will require sensitivity and understanding, which quite a few of you have said this tonight. Councillors should be at the heart of this. You will be instrumental in this because who knows your ward better as ward councillors? But there's just one thing I would like to say. Whilst we're supporting our citizens and helping them to get access and give voices to things, we also have to support them when whatever they are arguing for or against, that if it doesn't go their way, they've had their say. And it's your role to support them in that as well. We can't just leave them in the lurch. So if you're supporting them to do a petition, support them if they don't get their expectations of what's happening. Councillor Burke, I heard what you're saying. Happy to talk to you if you want to come and talk to me. I've said it many times before in this chamber. If you need to talk to me about anything, Councillor Watson, I'm lost for words what you said. If I'd have known, I'd have tried to action something, and others would have too. So, yeah, I'm absolutely confident that we're doing the right thing here in Kirklees. It's our council plan. I hope you can support it tonight, and I do think scrutiny does have a role in it. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. Right to reply, Councillor Pandor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for all councillors who have made some really good contributions. Our role as councillors, our role as cabinet members, my role as leader, is to balance all the conflicting priorities and opinions. And I'm sure you will appreciate that is a very difficult task. But that's the role I have, and I will face up to that. For example, we've got a net zero reduction target by 2038. Health inequalities, a massive issue, then been there for decades. Education attainment, we need to improve year on year. Big issues on transport infrastructure, big opportunities there that the government has posed in front of us, and we need to grasp them. We've got a big housing delivery plan, not just in terms of our existing housing stock, but also the supply of housing and how we then plan even further, because national projections are we have to build 250,000 homes a year, and we will do our bit to help government do that. Job creation, that's a big role for us. We've got a target there in our local plan to deliver 30,000 new jobs, because we owe that to our existing workforce, we owe that to our future workforce, and that is a really critical piece in the jigsaw of a healthy, flourishing community of Kirklees. And the investment that's going on, that's been put forward, the biggest investment plan that this council has seen since it was formed. But one thing I need to focus on is air quality, because, and again, this is where we need to look at the facts. We all know air quality, poor air quality kills. And the young girl who lost her life is one girl too many in London. And we know we have got areas within Kirklees, one of them is the A629, where air quality is a big issue. And that's where we have to be true to ourselves. And that's where I just need to reinforce what Councillor Simpson said, that we have to play politics where it's needed, but not at a detriment of children, air quality, and where lives are lost. And that's where, Andrew, to be honest with you, I'm disappointed in what you were saying. I know where you're going, but you're going to get found out. Because I respect what you say, I listen to you, but that's not a good place to be in what you said, because you have to look at the facts. In terms of Councillor Burke, we did approach your group, so I'm sorry that you weren't aware, but we did approach your group for input into the council plan, and that didn't come forward. But engagement is at the heart of what we do, and the offer is still there. I think in terms of what Councillor Watson said, I think I agree with exactly what he's saying, you know, and I think he made some really, really solid and really, really valid contributions. And one of the things I said was that despite having the council plan, we need to invest straight away, because there is stuff that we all know needs to happen, and we need to put our resources in right at the outset. Tidy streets, that's what people judge us on. Potholes, big issue. Road markings, Councillor David Hall quite rightly mentioned this a few meetings ago. These are the things that make a difference, and these are the things that will be critical. Street lighting, I need to get the basics right. So Councillor Watson, I completely agree with what he's saying, that get the basics right. And that's where we need a performance management framework that can measure, monitor, and then communicate back to our residents. We can't include everything in the plan, because if you start including everything, you know, the document will be even bigger than what it is, you know, there's got to be a stage where we have to just take an overview of where we are. But again, moving forward, data is very, very important. That data, robust data to monitor, measure, review, and improve the journey that we are on is critical. And there is an opportunity here with the health and social care bill and the
20 seconds.
ICS processes. And I mentioned earlier on that we can't just transfer, we need to transform. And that's where we will help government deliver that. So thank you, Mr. Mayor, for that. And once again, thank you to all the councillors, and thank you to our great staff who are actually working very hard to make this happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pandor. We will now go to the vote. We shall try a show of hands first. All those in favour? Against? Councillor Uppel, are you against it? Abstentions? That's carried. Thank you. There will now be a break. There will have to be a break, unless you want something embarrassing to happen at the top table. So, 10 minutes. quick announcement. I've been asked to ask you to make sure that your bags are under your chairs or under your seats so people don't fall over. Right. So now item 11, page 181, reappointment of independent person, reference from Standards Committee, Councillor Warner.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This should be a nice, short little topic. So basically, I just want to move the approval to be given to reappointment of the existing independent person for 2 years, and that it be noted that the monitoring officer will take the necessary steps to advertise for and appoint a further independent person. Okay?
Is that seconded? No, I wasn't seconded. No, you are not supposed to be the seconder. Councillor Sokol's the seconder. Doesn't he cause problems?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I second it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sokol. Are there any comments on this matter? No comments. We will go to the vote. All those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? That is carried. Thank you. Item 12 is withdrawn. Item 13, written questions to the leader, cabinet members, chairs of committees, nominated persons. 30 minutes for this item, but we don't have 30 minutes. Written schedule of submitted questions has been circulated. I will now invite members to ask their questions in turn. Is it a point of order? We shall...
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. It's just a point of order that whilst I fully understand council protocol does not allow questions to be submitted on a live planning issue, as I had hoped, I was wondering, genuinely wondering, how members of the council and the public would be aware of the existence of the amended carbon impact assessment, which has been referred to earlier by Councillor Cooper, and maybe needs to be referred to as the A629 New Frontier in the future. But the fact that the amendment is really not at all clear on the planning application, and I was attempting to raise a number of concerns.
Councillor Warner.
I'm attempting to raise the concerns.
I'm advised that this is not.
I understand that, but you know, we're in a climate emergency, and I was hoping that we could have had an element of tolerance on this particular issue, because some of the conclusions...
Maybe you should bring a motion to council so we can discuss it.
Right, okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper. Is this a point of order, or is this a question?
My question. Yeah, just a quickie, really, which is that if I understand what Councillor Warner has said, and that questions will not be answered about a live planning matter, but in terms of questions being asked, she can do. There's nothing under standing order rules which say a question cannot be asked, and I'm reading the when questions cannot be asked, the annual council meeting, the budget council meeting, the announcement of a general election to polling day, or the publication of a notice of ordinary elections to polling day. So if she wishes to ask a question, she can do.
Can we, Councillor Cooper, can you ask your question for item 13, please? Can we move on?
Councillor Warner submitted written questions but wasn't allowed to put them. But I think she should have been able to. Anyway, my question to Councillor Pandor. Pardon? Sorry,
Councillor Bolt, please.
Thank you. To Councillor Pandor, you said at the Overview and Scrutiny Management Committee meeting in August, you'll also be aware that we're having a big distribution company coming into Kirklees. I'm trying my best to actually get the 1,500 jobs in place. Can you please detail how you were doing your best? Was it a phone call, an email, a meeting? If so, can you tell us with who, when, and what was discussed?
Councillor Pandor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Cooper, for that question. And I'm glad that you've brought this question once again to the Council. We've had questions on this issue in the past. We've had it now, and I'm sure we will have them in the future. Councillor Cooper, you will understand that as leader and also as leaders of opposition, we have many conversations and many discussions to make sure that we do the best for our borough. And in my role as a leader, in our roles as cabinet members, and also in our roles as councillors, it's a continuous dialogue with anybody that comes to us to make sure that we actually want to do the best for our borough, be that investment, be that jobs, be that housing, or anything else that benefits our communities. But one thing I can assure you of, that never ever will I, or have I, interfered in the planning process. And I think that's the distinction we need to make, because to do that would be wrong. Also, I have no power on the planning committee. I don't sit on the planning committee. I've never ever whipped any of my members or any other members in terms of voting one way or another. So I hope that's very, very clear, that the role as leader, the role as cabinet, the role as councillors is completely separate to the role of the planning committee. And I hope that clarifies the situation, but I'm sure that you've got a supplementary.
I have. And I must say, Councillor Pandor, I'm disappointed in you. I've got to say, I didn't ask a question about the planning process. I asked a fairly simple question as to what you meant when you said something in a meeting. And I'm going to give you another chance to answer the question, because you just haven't answered it. If, Councillor Pandor, you did nothing at all to get 1,500 jobs in the area, if it was simply something you said to make yourself look like you were doing something when maybe you weren't, I don't know. But just tell us what you did. When you said you did something, what did you do? I don't want to know about planning committees, don't know about any of those things. It's that question. So please answer it.
I have made my position very, very clear. I've clarified the situation, and I don't want to add anything else, because it's very, very clear that you are playing politics with this.
I'm asking a question.
Andrew,
Councillor Cooper, let him answer.
Please let me finish. I made my position very, very clear, because I do know what you're trying to do here, and I'm not going to bite, or I'm not going to get drawn in to your petty politics. Thank you.
It's not biting, it's not drawing in, it's answering a question.
Councillor Cooper.
Just answer the question.
Councillor, question 2. Councillor Cooper.
And relax. So, another question to Councillor Pandor. Will Kirklees be finally following the lead given by Calderdale and now Wakefield, not Bradford councils, in recommending that the West Yorkshire Pension Fund divests from fossil fuels? So you've got to answer to this question.
Asked a proper question, and really pleased that you've asked me this question. What I will do is I will ask my learned cabinet member, Councillor Paul Davis, who's done a lot of work on this, who will give you some good news, I'm hoping. Thank you.
I'm very much hoping I can calm Councillor Cooper down and bring a smile to his face.
Well, I'm
so.
more. Thank you.
It would really make me feel a lot better. in terms of your question, one short word before I explain is yes.
Okay.
But just a couple of more sentences. Certainly, I think, as you are probably aware, and we are aware, most people are aware, the West Yorkshire Pension Fund does have an ethical basis to it, with criteria that's linked to that. and investments are on a regular basis reviewed against these. But what we will be doing, absolutely assure you, is using our influence to stop the fund investing in companies producing fossil fuels and moving its current investments in such companies elsewhere. So very straightforward, that's how we should work.
Thank you. That's progress. It's been a number of years, I've got to say, since I first raised the issue about fossil fuels in the West Yorkshire Pension Fund. So I'm pleased about that, and good to hear it, and great to have an answer to a question. So good. My supplementary would be, will West Yorkshire Pension Fund also divest from the funds that are supporting Leeds Bradford Airport expansion? Because the West Yorkshire Pension Fund is also investing in the company which is behind the expansion of Leeds Bradford Airport. So will you also divest from that?
Well, I think that, unless I've missed something, the original question was very much about divesting from fossil fuel investments. Obviously, that's what we're following up on. Obviously, that's what we're going to do. If we want to have separate discussions on that item, more than happy to have separate discussions.
Yeah,
but
more than happy.
Yeah, okay, that's fine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Question 3, question by Councillor Munro to the Cabinet Member for Learning, Councillor Pattison.
The decision to close Almonbury Junior School in 2014 has been the catalyst for everything that has followed. Millions and millions of pounds have been spent in the process of reconfiguring the schools in our area. How are the council measuring outcomes?
Thank you, Councillor Munro, for this question again.
Yeah.
Yes, education is expensive, but I'm happy to spend as much as we are able to ensure a good education for all our children and young people in Almonbury and the whole of Kirklees. We have to invest in our children's future, and this costs money in the first instance. We are highly ambitious and aspirational for our children and young people, but our communities and learners and at the heart of all our decision making, the clear intent is to improve standards of education, tackle inequalities, and to create the conditions to enable the very best outcomes for children, young people and their families. This is what was very clearly set out in our Kirklees Futures, our education strategy approved at Cabinet last week. Our vision, our obsessions, our recommendations contained within that strategy are what has and continues to underpin investment of money, time and resources across our schools in Kirklees. Simply put, our children and young people deserve the best. And as we have said before, it's the right thing to do. So we will measure outcomes in terms of this strategy by monitoring annually its action plan. And beyond this, we already monitor the achievements of our young people and their education settings, but not exclusively, via the progress our children make at individual and school level, attainment results at each of the key stages, our education, employment and training figures, and attendance figures, just to name a few. Because, of course, we must not forget that the council plan that we've approved today is yet another mechanism to monitor the progress of our children and their achievements. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I have a supplementary, please. Thank you. So, thank you. So I'd like to know, do our local schools continue to be oversubscribed? Are there enough places? Is the amalgamation of pupils from the former Almonbury Community School and existing pupils at King James School working? Have any problems been encountered at King James School that previously didn't exist? How do you value success and money well spent?
Which of those questions would you like me to answer?
Well, which do you want to answer?
Choose a question,
The whole
Councillor Munro.
reconfiguration of education in Almonbury was to make sure that there was a sustainable provision of education spaces and education quality, importantly, quality, in the Almonbury area. And as far as I'm aware, there is no problems with that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Question 4. Councillor Lawson to the Leader of the Council, Councillor Pandor.
Thank you, Mayor. How does the Leader of the Council hope to attract highly skilled and well-paid jobs by welcoming applications for motorway distribution warehouses?
Thank you, Councillor John Lawson. You're probably aware that in Kirklees we have higher than the national and the regional unemployment levels, so there's a big challenge and a big task in front of us. For example, in your ward, Councillor Lawson, we have got 565 people on out-of-work benefit, and it's sad to say that there are 100 youngsters under 25 who actually fall in that category. So that's a figure and a statistic that's one too high. Overall in Kirklees, there's 14,000 residents that are in out-of-work benefits, and we need to actually start to address that. We need a range of jobs, and we need a range of skills, and we need a range of investment, and we have a framework to do that, which is the local plan. Logistics is a growing area, and that's a phenomenon that's taking place all across the country. And it's just how shopping habits are changing. But in our part of the world, Kirklees, it's not a big factor in terms of the number of distribution centres. So there are opportunities there for anybody to come forward and put their proposal forward. But we're not overly reliant on that. So, as far as my role goes, and again, I can only repeat what I said earlier on, is to make sure that if anybody wants to invest in Kirklees, if anybody wants to address the massive shortage of employment, and as far as I'm concerned, the higher the skilled job, the better for us, because you will create a better economy. Thank you, Councillor Lawson.
Supplementary.
Thank you, Mayor. I have with me an FOI from a meeting in 2018 about just such development. And it says here on the following, it says, development of such a strategically important site would need to project a positive image for the Kirklees and Leeds City region economies. This should be secured through recognition of the site's prominence and topography, and subsequently lead to a high level of mitigation. The Council's view is that such a mitigation should specifically influence a high level of design and layout which ensures buildings reflect the need for flexibility, but are of high design standard and ensure the positive statement to be made at this key location. My question to you is, do you think that distribution warehouses make that difference? Do you think that they follow that design plan?
Thank you, Councillor John Lawson. And we've had a conversation on this, haven't we, where the false information that was released, and quite rightly you had concerns, and I met you and your ward colleague to make my position very, very clear. So I hope that the conversation we had, which I don't want to go into detail about, clarified that position. But once again, there's a distinction between what my role as leader is and what the role of the planning process is. And I hope I made that position very, very clear to you. But as far as I'm concerned, we need highly skilled, highly paid professional jobs, and the more we can get that into our borough, I think that will be better for the outcomes of all our residents.
Well, it wasn't the question, Mayor, but thank you, Councillor Pandor.
Thank you, councillors. You can put your pens down now. Your time is up. The exam is over. Can I thank you all for your patience? And can I thank all the staff, including all the technical staff up there and over here and around the back. And have a safe journey home. Thank you.